9/11/2021, right? And we have a lot going on in our country and a lot going on with the talking heads on the news. Boy, I tell you, it's incredible. The more I watch things, the more I feel like I'm living in a live episode of The Twilight Zone, I'll tell you. But right now we have the critical racial theory thing going on across the country. And we have all the, I'm just going to say like he said, those people, you people, and I'm not talking about white people or black people when I'm referring to, I'm talking about you Democrats, both black and white Democrats, the most ignorant humans on the planet today is the black and white DINO Democrat, Democrat name only, idiots is what they are. And we're going to start today by looking at one of the idiots, okay, and this guy here. We're going to really touch on some bases about some things about, too, like what an educated idiot is. And I don't mean to say these things to be offensive. They're statements of fact. They're just a fact. And the facts prove themselves by the actions and the things that these people themselves present, of which they prove themselves to be idiots, knowing idiots. And they are. And the scary thing is when you watch these things, these people actually believe they're telling the truth. They actually believe their version of the delusional Twilight Zone they live in of the democratic world. So let's take a look at some of what we're talking about here. We're going to jump right into this and get into it and check it out. This guy here is, quote, Dr. Rashid Ritchie, okay? This guy, wow, what can I say? I don't know, I don't know. This guy here is the perfect example of another paper brain idiot. A doctor, right? It says doctor. I don't know if that's some kind of doctorate in theology, history, medical, or whatever his claim is. I haven't really looked much into this guy. But I was referred to one of his videos, and I started commenting on the video. And in the comments, as you can see below right here, there's my comment to it. And we'll just look. There's quite a bit of replies to it, and then I start to reply to these replies, and then a fellow Timothy Cobb comes on, and I don't know if, quote, Dr. Ritchie came on and seen this and what he would have to say about it, but it's been a pretty long debate going on, and I've been trying to fill in the truth of the facts, what it seems that these people are quite not aware of, when you listen to it, and that's where we're going to start out with. We're going to take a quick listen to what I believe it was Dr. Ritchie, right? Yeah, Dr. Ritchie, we'll just call him Dr. Ritchie. Dr. Ritchie, this is incredible. But let's listen to what Dr. Ritchie has to say here.
These people, and I got to say it, these people.
Yeah, he said these people.
You're looking at Kelly McEnany, whatever the hell her name is. She's a liar. She's a liar who served as the White House press secretary under former President Donald Trump.
Just bear with me, people. We got to listen to this.
Now, damn it, we know you had to lie for Trump. We know you got a paycheck to lie for Donald Trump. Okay, we kind of almost get that. You sold your soul, yes, but we understand it.
We're going to jump ahead a little bit here because this guy is the most belligerent, ignorant ass I've ever heard recently. I mean, I've heard worse ignorant asses than this guy, but he is recently, I just can't believe this guy. I just can't believe it. But anyway, we're going to jump ahead. He's talking about the statements that she made in relation to the fireworks of the 4th of July, in reference to racial issues. If you guys seen it on the news, real quick.
Activists and even the news media smeared the all-American holiday with claims of racism. Squad member Cori Bush blasting Independence Day, tweeting, quote, when they say that the 4th of...
So pretty much it was her rant he's going on about now. And then we're just going to jump ahead here. You got the panel of her with these guys here talking. And she's referencing about, that how they don't seem to know the truth of history. But we're going to listen in and then to hear.
The evils of it. There's a great piece to that end on Heritage called 1776, not 1619. But I'll leave it to you. They're so wrong on so much. Where to begin?
Now, just so you remember, he called her a liar, and we'll go back. We'll listen to some of his quirky.
So this individual, who was part of an all-white panel on Fox News, and first of all, do we have to say all-white when we talk about Fox News? Okay. So this all-white panel on Fox News, they decided to discuss Representative Cori Bush's July 4th tweet. And here's a bit of how she introduced the segment.
But anyway, so you know, Dr. Ritchie supposedly claims that she's lying this out. Now, the important thing, what I wanted to mention was something she said nearing the end of what she says here. And then we're going to touch a little bit more on what Dr. Ritchie has to say here. Okay, right here, a real important thing I want you to pay attention to because we're going to cover this.
Great piece to that end on heritage called 1776, not 1619, but I'll leave it to you.
Did you hear that? Not 1776, but 1619. Did you hear that?
Others were against slavery, recognize the evils of it. There's a great piece to that end on heritage called 1776, not 1619, but I'll leave it to you. You know, they're so wrong on so
Now, it's very important you remember because it seems that Dr. Ritchie's a little ignorant to understand about what she's talking about, and that's what we're going to get into right now. We're going to take a listen. Like we also have here, MLK is not who Republicans want him to be. This guy is a real character and really ignorant to history. I don't know. I'm really curious to find out what the doctor thing stands for. Doctor in idiocy? Maybe that's it, huh, Doc? You got a doctorate in idiocy? Let me tell you something. I don't claim to be a genius, smart guy, doctorate, a paper brain idiot. I do have a lot of paper brain certifications at master level, and I guess I could probably go in and get a doctorate level if I wanted in some of the things that I've studied in life. But, you know, I don't care about any of those paper brain certifications that I have. They really don't mean nothing because people like you prove that a paper brain without common sense and reasonable articulate ability to apply what is their knowledge, they're just educated idiots. And you prove that. And we're going to go forward and look at that. But here, let's just take a look. Maybe, Dr. Ritchie, you need to consider something here. His gripe is that about American slavery and the history of slavery in America. As if, and it appears, from my understanding, what I'm saying, Dr. Ritchie believes that a black African slavery started in America. And he believes that the United States of America is the cause of all suffering of today's black people. Let me tell you something, Dr. Ritchie, and I'm going to put this very clear to you and all your other DINO black and white Democratic friends out there, okay? You're an idiot. The only people who are the cause of black Democrats suffering today are themselves because they're stupid. They're idiots. They put themselves in a position back in 1934 with FDR. They put themselves in the very position they are today from 1934 forward. And with Lyndon B. Johnson, one of the most racist Democrats members, who was a Ku Klux Klan member out of Texas, who is considered to be the black Democrats' civil rights hero, which is a mind-blowing. But, because, I mean, like I said, the guy was a Ku Klux Klan member out of Texas. But, hey, you know, I'm just saying. It goes to show the ignorance. Now, I don't really, first off, I'm going to say something to you. I was raised and born in Newark, New Jersey. I, as a child, really didn't understand anything about racism because, in truth, where I grew up in the ghettos of Newark, New Jersey in the 60s and 70s, I was the minority. The majority of people that were black, I was the minority as a white person in the ghettos of Newark, New Jersey at that time. Number two is that there was no racism there. The only color anybody was in Newark, New Jersey, I recall as a child growing up there, was poor. There was no white or black, and there was no real. I grew up in that mixture of a pot of white and black, and there was really no racism because we all had to look out for each other. It was a horrible, criminal-infested place of just horrors, and I remember it as a child. Trust me, it was horrors. It was a very violent and criminal place to be. And we had to look out for each other. And, you know, and then not to mention, too, my stepfather was a black man. So, and a lot of my values as a young kid came from my stepdad, Phil. And, you know, he was he was a black man, not very much even liked by a lot of people in the city at that time because he was a black Republican. He was a true American. That's what he was. He was a true American. But anyway, we're going to move forward just so you understand a little bit about me. And so you know, I never really attended school much. Okay, in all honesty, and that was one thing my stepdad was amazed at me when I was a kid. I taught myself to read going on 5 years old. I taught myself to read pictorially from a dictionary. And being, you know, at that time, you had 24-hour libraries for night court in Newark, New Jersey, and as well in Manhattan. And I used, once I taught myself to read out of a dictionary, by the time I was 5, going on 6 years old, I could read just as good as anyone. And also by the time I was 6 years old, I taught myself to read and write in cursive writing. Okay, so, and this was on my own, but I never really attended school. I'm the youngest of 7 children. My youngest sister, who's older than me, when she started to attend school is what made me want to learn to read and write and whatever, and that's another story. But Anyway, I really, I was on and off in school. I went for picture day once in a while for my mother so she could have pictures of me. That was about the only time I really attended school. I was busy as a kid shining shoes, making money, selling yo-yos, doing mail runs in buildings without elevators, such and such, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't have time for school. And if they tried to make me go to school, I would just get in trouble, get in a fight, and get thrown out of school because I had no time. I needed to get out and make money. So that was my thing. And I actually didn't really start going to school until I was like 13 years old. But by the time, and then just really short, I'm not going to go into that. I could, if you want, you could look, I'll do another video on me or whatever. But, at that time, I started to attend school. For my own self-education, I was an honor student from when I started to attend school. They started me in advanced classes, 6th grade, highest levels of what they called it at the time. I attended for 5 years because I did 11th and 12th in the same year and graduated that same year at high school as an honor student. So just so you know, I'm not stupid. I'll just put it that way. I'll admit this though. I'm an educated idiot on a lot of things because I've studied a lot of things in life, but I've never put a lot of things to practical use that I've studied. So in those things I never put to practical use and I don't actually know how to do, I only have knowledge of, I'm an educated idiot. Just like many of you are educated idiots, and that's what I mean. See, I even call myself an educated idiot, so you understand it's not an offensive term. It's just a fact that some people have knowledge of things and no wisdom, no common sense, no reasonable ability to apply them or understand them, or they don't further them to an understanding of where they understand the practical truth of them. That seems to be your problem, Dr. Richie. You have an understanding of cherry-picked history you want to believe, and you follow that motto of like the Democrats and Joe Biden, what he says, you choose truth over facts. And the reason of that is you choose the Democratic pitch of truth, which is lies, over facts, because if you looked at the facts, you'd realize they were lies, and you would know they're not the truth. That's what we're going to try and do today. So let's go forward and take a look. First off, I want to start off with this, Dr. Richie. So you understand, the black African slave trade actually started in 640 A.D., and it was founded by the black Africans slave trade was founded by the Arab Muslims upon them invading North Africa in that time. Muhammad, the said-to-be prophet of Islam, was a racist, a true-out racist, hated black people. And throughout history, it's the first religious history that comes up in human history that I can record. I studied 13,000 years of human history in its written form. Very in-depth, very, very, really, I'm fascinated with the stuff. And that religious history of Islam is the first religious history ever to actually define or mention or point out colors of people. Prior to the Nation of Islam or Islam itself arising in humanity some 1,400 years ago, there was never anywhere in the Bible of the Old Testament or the New Testament where it references to a color of a person until Islam comes along. And then Islam distinctively makes sure that you understand Muhammad was a white man, and he points out throughout all the writings of Islam, everybody who was a black man. They point this out. And, we'll go forward a little bit here, but you can look, here's a video I did, I'll put a link in these things. This is a video here called The Lies of the Nation of Islam, Wait Until You See the Unquestionable Facts of Truth. Follow that video, you get a good understanding of Islam and its racism, and how Muhammad was a white racist and the father of racism. But my point is, this was some near 1,100 years, okay, and then 1,100 years before America was discovered is what I was going to say, that these things are taking events. Okay, now this is the legacy of Arab Islam in Africa. This was written by an African himself, an African historian. I read this book. It's a fascinating book. I'm trying to see if we have an image of this guy, which we don't. I don't know if I can find one. But anyway, it's about what I'm talking about. It's about the invasion of North Africa and the enslavement of black Africans in 640 A.D. And it's a very detailed and in-depth fact of history by an African black historian who writes about this. So maybe you might want to read that book, Dr. Richie, and get an understanding and realize that the black African slave trade literally started like 1,100 years before Columbus even came to discover what we know to be now America. Okay, and I understand too, a lot of people that, well, he did not discover America. I've had this argument before. I understand. We're just going by the point of when the European Columbus found America, okay? We know there was other people. We know other people been here, blah, 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 whatever. I'm just saying, when Columbus founded America, for it to become what it is today, That was 1,100 years after the black African slave trade had been started by the Islamic Muslims. So you understand that the black Africans were being traded in slavery around the world for 1,100 years before America was even starting to be established. Just so you're aware of that. I don't know if you're aware of that. And also, the other thing you need to understand is that prior to the Muslims invading North Africa and enslaving the black Africans, the majority of all world slaves were white slaves. Yeah, imagine that, right? And then so you understand as well, though they started enslaving the black African slaves, okay, they didn't stop enslaving white slaves as well. There was always, never a point in history when slavery existed that there was always twice as many white slaves in the world as there were black slaves. And so you're aware, in Great Britain, there was twice as many white slaves as there ever was black slaves in America. And those white slaves in Great Britain that labored the copper and brass mines for the kings of Great Britain, that were the poverty-stricken people who were taken and enslaved out of Scotland and Ireland, they were worked to death in those mines. Okay, and mostly too, they even worked the children to death. They didn't care. Anybody, if you were not rich or of royal family or somebody important, you were subject to be slave. And the British kings had no mercy. They were totally inhumane. So inhumane that there's stories of these things in the ancient history of what are known, like that are even found and you find to be justified history, and where you can't question it because, like for instance, Spain. The Queen of Spain, in writings with her back in her time, going back to the 1600s now, speaks about the inhumanity of Britain and its cruelty on the women and children in the copper and brass mines. It was one of the reasons that Spain was led to abolish slavery themselves when they seen the inhumanity of it during a visit where one of the queens of Spain had visited there, and she was wondering what was the strong stench of death, and she was told that the slaves, if they die in the mines, they just bury them in the mines. They're not worth bringing up. Imagine that. That's how inhumane they were. If somebody was a slave working the mines and they died down there, the other slaves were told, don't even waste your time bringing them up. Don't. Just keep working, bury them in a hole, and keep going. And the stench of death was vomiting. It made her vomit. In some of the writings I remember reading about out of Spain's queen, that led to where she had viewed the institution of slavery as so inhumane that they wanted to abolish it. Anyway, but so you might want to read about, and they were white slaves, not black slaves. That was all white slaves, Irish, because you know what? The kings of Great Britain and England and France, they didn't want black African slaves in their colony. They didn't want it. They didn't want that. They had enough of their own white. They weren't going to pay for slaves, and they could just go enslave their own poor, and that's what they did. And China did the same thing. China had slaves too. They were enslaving their own Chinese people. India was enslaving its own people. Arabs were enslaving its own people until they found the black Africans. Then they started enslaving them too. I mean, pretty much everybody in world history was subject to being slaves. And so you understand as I go along, I'm going to explain some facts about history. And you can do your own due diligence and fact check me. And I'll challenge anybody right now on anything I'm saying. You do the due diligence research. And if you find anything I'm saying to be wrong or not true, you present your facts in the comments below, and we will debate that. Okay? And if I'm wrong, believe me, I want to know I'm wrong. But I'm going to tell you right now, the only thing I care about is the truth. Because my God, who is the true God of all creation, the one and only living God, states to me by the wisdom given to me, he gives me this wisdom, and this is what I live by. You will always be able to prove a lie to be a lie with the truth. But you can never prove the known truth to be a lie with a lie, because the truth will always reveal the lie. So God tells me. So that's the principles I live by and which I go by. So with that said, now we look here, recalling Africa's harrowing tale of its first slavers, the Arabs, as UK slave trade abolishing is commemorated, okay? So these are just some things that you're talking, you might want to look into. Dr. What was his name? I don't even really know. Dr. Ritchie. These are some things you may want to look into, okay? Okay, so we're here, okay, here. Okay, so now here we are. Now, here's the thing you got to understand, Dr. Ritchie, is that with what you're speaking of, okay, and how you're talking, you mentioned in the comments, 250 years of slavery. Here's the problem, Dr. Ritchie, you don't understand. One, black people were not the only slaves, and not all black people were slaves. This is the thing, too, I wanted to touch on, was I don't think you understand that the right to own a slave in the new continent of America when it was under British rule was established by a man named Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson was a slave owner who in 1655 had 2 slaves run away. This happened in Virginia, in the colony of Virginia, okay, while it was under British rule in 1655. Now, these two slaves ran away and they applied for their freedom, claiming to be that they were indentured servants. Funny thing is, Anthony Johnson himself came to America as an indentured servant, fulfilled his indenturement, and was now free from his indenturement. He was a free black man, okay? When his slaves ran away and they applied for their freedom and claimed to be indentured servants who have fulfilled their indenturement and they should be released, the court was going to grant that, but Anthony Johnson raised rule that no, he wanted his slaves back. And in the ruling, in the end, the white guy, because it was a white slave and a black slave, the white guy had proved he did have an indenturement with him and should have been released, but he still had time on his indenturement, so the court ordered him to fulfill his time. But the black slave, Anthony Johnson, presented papers that he had purchased him from the Arab Muslims as an actual slave. And from this hearing, the court had ruled, in giving a right, they had ruled that John Cassar, who was the slave, was to serve all his natural life as a slave owned as property by Anthony Johnson, who was a free black man. And John Cassar was a black man too. He was a black African slave that Anthony Johnson purchased. So understand that it was legally established to own another human being as a slave by a free black man in 1655, Anthony Johnson, in the courts of Virginia. This is the actual, I'll put a link to this, you can see the court rulings and paperwork and transcript of those hearings that took place in 1655. Okay? I just want to make that point to you to understand. If you really got a problem with somebody, you should start with Anthony Johnson. If it wasn't for him, there wouldn't have been no legal right on this continent to own a person as a slave as property. So, just saying. But anyway, let's move forward here. The establishment of the United States of America. Now, see, that's something that she said. You remember I said that important part in the video back here? Let me just go back and see if we can find out where we're at right here. I just want to see if I can find it right here, where she says this.
All of our main founding fathers were against heritage called 1776, not 1619. But
that right there, did you hear it?
19, but I'll leave heritage called 1776, not 1619. But I'll leave.
Okay, so now we're back up to where we're talking about here, and that's what I'm saying here. The Revolutionary War and the establishment of the United States of America. See, that's why I think, Dr. Richie, you got something messed up with. You see, America, after Columbus came, and it was recognized that it was here, and the British kings took authority over it and started to colonize here, was under British rule. The United States of America didn't start until 1776, when we claimed our independence as the Americans. Which, mind you, even all the way up until that point, there was abolitionists who sought to end slavery, because, like I said, blacks were not the only ones subject to slavery. Not all blacks in America were slaves. Matter of fact, in the original settlement of the 13 colonies, there was twice as many free blacks as there were slave blacks in the South. Maybe you ought to look into that. Okay, and the other thing you need to look into is Anthony Johnson was not the only black free black man who owned black slaves, okay? Literally, thousands of free blacks in America owned themselves black slaves, okay? Maybe y'all want to look into that too. We're going to touch on that a little bit as we go forward too, about some of the things today, by the very ancestry of the very same people who then owned slaves, today are still politically involved and are playing the puppet pundits of the Democratic Party, which lead idiots like you, Doctor, into believing this idiocy you believe. Okay, and we're going to touch on that. But anyway, let's keep moving forward. This goes to the Revolutionary War in 1776. Now, you mentioned in there about the Declaration of Independence, and you slammed on all the founding fathers as being racist, no good slave owners, and what have you. But here's another thing I want to touch on real quick so you understand something. All people in the world at that time owned slaves, white and black. And as well in America, they owned slaves, white and black. Many of the Tory, who were the British loyalists in the South, not only owned the black slaves, they didn't own black slaves, matter of fact. Most of the Tory and the wealthy people who were in the South before 1776, before America evolved, they were known as the Tory, the British Kingsmen. They were the elitist royal, entrusted by the royal kings of England and Great Britain to handle and manage the plantations for King George, to help him make money by using the slave labor to labor the farms and then bundle the produce and get it over to him to export so he can make money. You see that? It was a business commerce thing. And slavery was not really on the basis of then of color. Really didn't matter if you were black or white. There was many Irish slaves and Scottish slaves who as well, but there's a reason why the majority slave became black African slaves. And that reason again goes back nothing to do with the United States of America or even Great Britain. It has to do with Muhammad, the prophet of Islam. You see, the Islamic Muslims were racist. They did not watch my video that I have, I put the link to here, where my video, right here. Lies of the Nation of Islam. It explains a lot to you, so you get a good understanding. And as well, you want to read this book, The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa. It'll give you a real good understanding, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But now we're back to this area here with the Revolutionary War thing. Okay, understand, not all black people were slaves, and black people who were slaves were not the only slaves. There was a lot of white slaves. Okay, one thing you got to understand too is that in the colonies, in the southern areas where the farming districts were, that were ran by the Tories, the British Loyalists, we called the British Loyalists after the Revolutionary War, but prior to that they were the Tories, the Kingsmen. They were the elitists of the King's courtmen who managed everything for him here in these colonies. Okay, they as well, when they would go to get the slaves for the king or the slaves to be imported by the Muslims over here, they would also buy themselves white sex slaves, women. And there's many cases as well, like Anthony Johnson's in the court under the British rule, and where people reported a wife being mistreated, only to find out she wasn't a wife. She was actually a purchased slave from the Islamic Muslims. She was enslaved because she was a Christian by the Muslims and sold as a slave. And some Tory or loyalist that was of the King's court who was managing, he purchased her, brought her back as a sex slave. And most who were outside of that realm would see him walking around with her, whatever, assumed that was his wife. But no, it wasn't his wife, she was a slave. And there's many a case where the confoundment between a slave woman, a white slave woman, being mistaken for a wife in those times. It was a common practice thing because, most of the colonists in America, after being born here on this continent, were not aware of worldly things in the way it worked outside in the world in relation to these things. So they would not assume, as what the world would, that was possibly a slave woman. But the rest of the world would, because it was commonplace in Scotland, Ireland, and all over Great Britain and England and France for white people to be slaves as well. So, but you're obviously not aware of that, Dr. Ritchie. Maybe you ought to do a little due diligence in the history. But the other point, too, that I'd like to say is that many of the blacks themselves who were free in this country, because they were not all slaves, they themselves as well owned both black and white slaves. Not just here, but around the world. Okay, and this is something that people have to be aware of. And by the end of this, I got a way of, because like I said, my history and my understanding is not indoctrinated by the education system. It's a self-study of a long endeavor of my own seeking of truth, and this has been since I was a child, and it's what the facts I found of truth say. So, and that's all I'm stating is the facts. If you don't think that are facts and you have something of evidence that can prove I'm not telling the truth, you let me know. But anyway, we're going to move on now. So after the Revolutionary War, we had the Declaration of Independence. Now, you mentioned that the Declaration of Independence was actually a document of slavery. What you don't understand, Dr. Ritchie, is the state of the world at that time, and that slavery was prevalent all around the world. Okay, white and black people both, and not just black people. I know you black people want to feel like you own slavery, but I got news for you. You don't own slavery. Okay? It was black and white people. That's why white people were willing to risk their life and die to have slavery abolished, because they knew in that time what was going on in Britain, France, England, Scotland, and Ireland, okay, with the white slaves. So, and they knew they were just as subject to be slaves as the black Africans were to be subject to slaves. But like I say, the reason here, like I was off base, the reason the black African became the majority slave around in America was because of affordability. You see, like I was saying, the Islamic Muslim prophet Muhammad, he devalued black people to be only worth that of half of a white person. And this value system as well led into that of the sale of slaves. So if you went to the Arabs to buy a boatload of slaves, it would cost you twice as much to buy a boatload of white slaves than black slaves. Because you could get 2 black slaves for the cost of 1 white slave. Because Muhammad devalued them to be worth half that of a white man. A black person by Muhammad of Islam, he devalued black people to be worth only half that of white people. And that trade system led into the value system of slavery. So most people, being they only needed slaves for labor, they didn't really give a damn what color they were. Okay, they just wanted them to go out and labor. So they would buy the black slaves because you get twice the labor force for the money, right? It was economical. That part that was true. It was just economical. It wasn't really a racial issue. It was economical. You get twice the slaves. And the kings of Great Britain were like, yeah, well, you get twice the slaves. Okay, and that's the way it worked. Okay, so they bought all black slaves to ship here to the American continent to do the farming for them as labor force. Okay, and that's just the way it was. It wasn't because they were black. It was because you got twice as many, twice the labor for the money. That's what it was really about. If you do your due diligence, you'll find this out. Okay, now I just want to enter too. I want to say that system and that cause was because of Muhammad. Okay, because it had been that way for a long time. Everyone knew that this was established before Muhammad died. Okay, about the value system, and it all happened because there's a story about it where he had converted a slave unknowingly, and it was a white slave. This is the funny thing, right? See, this is a story about Muhammad the prophet who has a white slave come to him, and the white slave wants to be a Muslim. And so Muhammad converts him to Islam. Now it's against the law for a Muslim to be a slave. So now this guy can't be a slave. And the owner, when he finds out, goes to Muhammad and says, what did you do? This was my slave. Now I'm deprived of my slave because I can't hold him any longer as a slave because as a Muslim it's forbidden. So Muhammad said to him, well, I didn't know he was a slave. From now on, I'll inquire those things, right? The so-called all-knowing prophet didn't know. Allah didn't tell him that, hey, whoa, that guy's a slave. No, I'm just saying. Watch my video on Islam, Lies of Islam. But anyway, so what he said to him was, I will pay for him with two black slaves. I will give you 2 black slaves to repay you for this one white slave. And that was where the value system started, that a white slave was worth twice as much as a black slave. The Islamic Muslims then started to trade that way in slavery because the Prophet did it, Muhammad, and that's now the new value system that, a white slave is worth 2 black slaves. So understand that. I'm not lying to you. This is the God's honest truth. This is how it happened. Okay, and why black people became the predominant slave, and the majority sought after slave because you got twice the slave labor for the cost. That's why. And white slavery kind of diminished outside of sex slaves for women. The majority of sex slaves were white slaves because they were highly more sought than that of the black African women. I don't know if that was a racial issue or preference or whatever, but mostly the higher population of sex slaves were white slaves, just so you know. So anyway, back to the Declaration of Independence. Now, you mentioned about all this. Now, see, why Thomas Jefferson's anti-slavery passage was removed from the Declaration of Independence. Now, I'm gonna give you my brief on this, and you do your due diligence, and you let me know if I'm wrong. Now, prior to the Declaration of Independence being filed, so you understand, slavery was in the process of a long time wanting to be abolished in the original colony areas by the Americans. You had mentioned also too on something I didn't put in here, but we're going to touch on it a lot. I'm going to try not to forget about you claiming that this country wasn't founded as a Christian nation. Well, you're wrong on that too, and I'm going to prove that at the end of this whole thing here. But Thomas Jefferson had an anti-slavery term that was in his Declaration of Independence. But here was the problem. Once that term was considered, because we sent the Declaration out among all the states or considered colonies then here in America that we were claiming our independence. The Southern Tory, when they seen the accusation against the King George that he imported a foreign people from a foreign land and enslaved them, and that he was accusing him as a wrong, they had concern, and then they started to rebel against the Patriot Americans in the Revolutionary movement with the Declaration of Independence. The Tory were loyal to Great Britain, and also all the slaveholders who were among the Tory, they didn't want slavery abolished. They were like, hell no, we're not going to be on board with this. So there was a big Civil War conflict. The first Civil War conflict started with the British Loyalist Tory at the same time we were fighting the Independence War with Great Britain, which maybe you're not aware of. I don't know. I mean, you're a doctor. I'm assuming maybe you have some kind of study in history. But at the end of this, we have somebody who as well may explain why you're ignorant as you are. We'll get into that a little bit as we go forward. But it seems maybe you're not aware that they removed that, not because Thomas Jefferson was racist or George Washington was racist or because the founders were racist and they supported slavery. They removed it to quiet down or stop any further aggression from that of the slaveholders in the southern farming district areas from rising up and fighting with the Patriots because they had enough to deal with fighting Great Britain, the biggest military country in the world at the time. And they also knew, if you read letters between Washington and Jefferson, and even James Madison at the time, young James Madison, you will find that they also reference about the possibility that by wanting to mention so early on, or including in anything about abolishing slavery, we could bring allies to Great Britain, like the Islamic Muslims, because that was the majority of their trade, was in the slave trade. The Muslims' biggest business was slave trade. So by mentioning the abolishment of slavery, well, it would align the Muslims to be allied with Great Britain against the newly trying to form nation of the United States. So you see, we removed it to remove aggression of other people who supported slavery attacking us with Great Britain. Maybe, I don't know if you can comprehend that, you know, maybe you think, maybe you're a doctor, you got a doctorate up there. I mean, you got to have, I hope, some level of common sense. Because I do know paper brain idiots, man. I want to show some examples at the end of this. You could be one of them. It apparently seems you might be, because it's like, I can't understand how somebody could talk so much about a thing and make accusations as you make, Dr. Ritchie, but yet clearly, it's clear you haven't done your due diligence in looking into things, because if you did, you would understand that you're wrong. You're wrong. You're spewing bullshit, and you're wrong. Okay, you're an idiot. And it's really, I can't, there's no other way of saying it. But anyway, let's move forward. Okay, so now, here's something I just want to put out. I'll include links to all this here. Christian arguments against slavery. Yeah, imagine that. This goes back to the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. It never stops. There was always a movement of abolishment of slavery by all people, white and black. But and here's the thing. This is written from back in that time by Benjamin Lay. This goes back to 1737. Okay, and this is kind of like transcript to what it was in the sense of what was being. Black and white abolitionists in the first half of the 19th century waged a barracuda assault against slavery. Their efforts proved to be extremely effective. Abolitionists focused attention on slavery and made it difficult to ignore. They heightened the rift that had threatened to destroy the unity of the nation even as early as the Constitutional Convention. Although some Quakers were slaveholders, members of the religious group were among the earliest to protest the African slave trade, the perpetual bondage of its captives, and the practice of separating enslaved family members by sale to different masters. Right? You wouldn't think about that. But also, to understand something. During these times, free black people were purchasing slaves as well. And when you really look at the history of the free black people who were slaveholders and traders, they're a little bit more inhumane than the white, even racial, no good, disgusting Tory Democrats. They were even worse, because like you take for Anthony Johnson, for due diligence in depth, and Anthony Johnson and another slave who was one of the largest black slaveholders in the nation, was a free black man named Ellison. Okay, and he had a history of raping his own black female slaves to impregnate them to breed more slaves to sell, and he sold his own freaking children. I mean, that's like, whoa, you know? I mean, that's like, wow, you know, that was like, yeah, that's the God's honest truth. Free black men raped their own female slaves to impregnate them to generate more slaves to sell, to make money. Yeah, they sold their own children. Right? Wow, really? Right? Isn't that shocking? Whoa, right? Yeah, black people did that. Black people. So you understand, it wasn't about race, really. It wasn't because they were black, really. It was about greed, power, elitism, no matter what color, really. It wasn't not a racial issue. And as we go forward, too, I'm going to explain to you something I learned through my own self-study of history, which I was shocked when I started to go to school. I was like, wait a minute, this is all wrong. You people are wrong. Because, and we'll get to it anyway. But anyway, so I just wanted to touch on that. We'll include links to these things so you can do your due diligence, get a little bit of education. Understand, too, in the comments, somebody had mentioned about, boy, I must be quick at Wikipedia, this, that, and everything. I can tell you something right now. I do these things offhand. Like, I got most of this information up where I could find things that I know, and I have known since the 70s, since I was a kid. Okay, back then, I'm sorry, we didn't have Wikipedia. Okay, everything I know was learned hard copy, in-depth study through incredible in-depth due diligence research. Because the only thing I cared about was the truth. And I learned very young in life something my stepdad taught me when I was very, very young. He said to me, there's two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. And he said, when it comes to history, The victor tells the story to his favor, the way he wants people to believe it, and it's not always the truth. And I know from the librarian in Newark who directed me to good guidance, where I was like, how do I know the truth? I was a little kid struggling with things about certain things. My stepdad had told me, and my Uncle Bernard told me, and some of the guys in the DINO told me that it's not true. And I'm like, well, why would they put it in a book if it's not true? And I was a young kid, I was like 6 years old, going through the struggle about why would people write lies, you know? And I found people write a lot of lies. And I understood the victor. But my stepdad and the librarian helped me understand that the best way to do it is find impartial people who have no benefit to support or discredit anything being said, that are reporting on an incident because they're associated somehow by being neighbors or whatever. And if their version of the history verifies it, then you'll know it's probably true because, as said, they have no reason to discredit it or verify it because they're not really associated. They're just reporting the history of events of what they see as a neighboring person to that event that took place. So that's what I always relied upon, was the evidence of facts, the things Democrats don't like, facts. You see, like Joe Biden says, they choose truth over facts. I get it. Because, and I understand it. You see, he wants you to believe, and the Democrats want you to believe the truth they tell you is the truth when they know it's lies. And the reason they tell you to choose their truth over facts is because if you look at the facts that I'm showing you, you're going to find out you've been lied to. That's what it really comes down to. So, like I say here, well, you probably assume, Dr. Ritchie, that slavery started to be abolished in 1861 at the start of the Civil War and the end conclusion in 1865, but that's not true. Slavery started to be abolished with the Declaration of Independence being filed and there right after. Vermont was the first state to abolish slavery, followed by Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts, the original 13 colony areas. And as we progress forward, you're going to see here, so you know, the original, I didn't bring this up, I'm going to bring this up while I'm telling you while I'm talking about this real quick. Understand that republicanism was the founding principle of what our nation was built upon. And the Republican Party was the first party of establishment for political consideration in this nation, founded by James Madison and Thomas Jefferson. And the reason that is because, we're going to find it right here, Article 4, Section 4. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, which was after the Declaration of Independence. We're going to bring this all the way back, because I didn't bring it up. We're going to have it here. And like I say, excuse me, sometimes I do these things, and court ruling and Anthony Johnson, we're past that point. Okay, here we are, okay. And then here, right, Vermont, past that point, Vermont, here. What's this? Okay, the Republican, okay. So I want to explain to you how the Republican Party came about. When we drafted in 1789 our Constitution, we had what was known as Article 4, Section 4. Now, there was only a single party system was the goal of America. One political party system, one republic. And that republic would be as was defined in the Federalist letters, the Federalist Papers, if you remember, by John Jay, James Madison, ring a bell, Alexander Hamilton, maybe your doctorate. I imagine you must have read these things, right? You must know what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm just a city kid from Newark, didn't even start school. I'm 13. I know very well about these things as a true constitutional republic American that's very proud to be American of this great God blessed nation. I am a true American. I love my nation. I love my heritage. I love who I am as a Republican American. I'm a true Republican American. Yeah, I am, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. And you know what? Honestly, to tell you, and as we go forward, you're going to understand that before FDR in 1934, the majority of all black Americans were Republicans. They would never be a disgraceful, no good, ignorant, racist, scumbag, elitist Democrat. But, you know, ignorance is bliss. But anyway, right here, Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. The United States will guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, and to protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature and or the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. So you understand, the only authorized form of government in the United States of America, the Republic of the United States of America, is a republican form of government. Okay, if you understand that. Not a democratic state, not a democracy, a republic. And if you want to read the Federalist Paper number 10, with James Madison makes it very clear what the difference is between a democracy and a republic. There's a big, big difference between the two, and I understand you ignorant Democrats like to keep referring to things here as a democracy when we're not, because you're ignorant, you're fools, you don't know. You're DINOs. I call you DINOs, Democrat in name only. Idiots who never take the time to even look into what it is you're a part of. You join the Democratic Party on the assumption of what you're told without ever doing the due diligence to say, well, who are these people really? Because if you did do the due diligence on who they really are and what their founding principles and ideology are, and still are to this very day, you would not be a Democrat if you were a true American. You would not be a Democrat. You'd be a Republican, because that you would understand the difference. You would know. You actually would have taken the time to understand this, but obviously a lot of DINOs don't. Black and white Democrats or DINOs all across this country are just idiots. Nothing you can do about it, I guess, obviously. But anyway, so you understand too, because I understand the Democrats like to tell you that the Republican Party wasn't founded until 1854, and that the Democratic Party was founded in 1828, and it's the first political party. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. Let me show you the facts so you understand, Dr. Richie. So you know what I'm saying? Pay attention here, because I know that's what you believe. I've seen in your comments where you talk about party switching and all this stuff here. More lies, and I'll prove it to you. Okay, but here, so you understand, James Madison, father of the Constitution. Okay, James Madison, 1751, 1838, his life legacy. Okay, in Orange County, Virginia, planter shown in a portrait by Charles Wilson Peale, right here, was a strong proponent of a strong central government to replace the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was the first Articles of Friendship between what was the colonies then, including that was controlled by the Tory Democrats in the South. We entered a League of Friendship till we could figure out what kind of government we wanted to establish. And they were known as, that League of Friendship was the Articles of Confederation. Often credited with being the father of the Constitution, James Madison, of 1787, Madison established the Jeffersonian Republican Party with Thomas Jefferson, and in 1809 succeeded him as president of the United States. See that? 1809. So understand, and it was this was in 17. They established the Republican Party in truth in 1787. It was the first political true party. And the reason that, and George Washington, so you know, I don't have it up right now. I can do this at a later time. I'll include more links or something. We'll follow up if you don't, or do your due diligence. If you look it up, there's letters between James Madison, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson, where Washington was opposed to any kind of political parties establishing. He felt that it could lead to a fascist state, and where, you know, if you can establish one party, other can establish opposing parties, and that the nation would become divided. He wanted to keep things under just a political Republican form of government and try to avoid that of fascist political parties. But Thomas Jefferson, in letters I've read that are in the archives, because most of Washington's letters sadly were burned by his wife, but there's letters from James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, you can read that in relation to this. There's a letter from Thomas Jefferson to George Washington where he informs him that Washington should have no concern about a Republican Party because of simply what I just showed. Thomas Jefferson states that the United States Constitution only consents to that of a Republican form of government, so it's only appropriate for a Republican Party to be established for that form of government, and that no other fascist oppositional party could develop because the Constitution wouldn't consent to it. This is what they believed. But, of course, later on we would find out Thomas Jefferson, as we found out many times before, was a young kid who was a great, very, very smart man, but lacking in wisdom, and Washington recognized this as well as James Madison, that he was lacking in wisdom. But in time, his wisdom came around, but by the time his wisdom did come around, the damage had already been done. We had a two-party system functioning in the United States of America, sadly. But anyway, just so you understand that it was in 1787, the Republican Party was founded by James Madison, Thomas Jefferson. This is further verified now, too. When you look at things that the Democrats are doing with the twisted version of history they like to give, they like to mention this Democratic Republican Party. That's a mythical party that never existed in that time. It's a lie, another lie of the Democrats. Okay, there was never a Democratic Republican Party. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, John Adams were never a part of anything called a Democratic Republican Party. No such party existed in that time. It's a Democratic Party lie. It's just another way that they try to propagate, associate the word Democrat with Republican in America in its history. The God's honest truth, the Federalist Paper number 10, makes it very clear the difference between a democracy, a democratic state, and that of a republic. Okay, and it makes it very clear by our founders that they only wanted a republic, is what they defined in in the Federalist Paper number 10, and which they clarified in Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. Okay, there was matter of fact, I will challenge you, Dr. I keep forgetting this guy's name, Dr. Ritchie. I would challenge you to search the entire Declaration of Independence and the entire Constitution for the word Democrat, democracy, or democratic. Just search it for those words. You won't find it once anywhere in the Constitution or Declaration of Independence. It does not exist. That's how clear we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't even mention it, because we wanted to make it clear it doesn't exist in this country, and it was not our intent in any way whatsoever. Okay? So anyway, as we move forward now, here's more proof so you can understand. This is an actual imaging of Thomas Jefferson's run in 1804 for president. And it says here, Republicans, turn out, and save your country from ruin. Now, it's very important that you read this, because I'm going to read this here. From an emperor, from a king, from an iron grasp of British Tory fascism, and an principled bandito of British speculators, the hireling tools and the mercenaries of His Majesty King George III have thronged our city and diffused the poison of principles among us. Down with the Tory, down with the British fascists, before they have in their power to enslave you. Did you see that? Enslave you. And he's not just talking to black people, he's talking to white people. Because we knew, and they knew, back in that time, that slavery was not just among black people. They knew that all of France, England, Scotland, and Ireland were embedded in the mining industry with white slaves, okay, who were worked to freaking death inhumanely. I mean, and they knew what the British king would do in the colonies, and we knew too the reason that some of the move was made, because we could see by the British aggression that they were eventually thinking of coming here, the king, and whatever, and furthering his establishment, and where it was clear that they were going to need more slaves for his vision and goals for more prosperity, and that why keep buying African slaves when you could just enslave the colonists, right? Like they were doing in England, Scotland, and Ireland, right? They just start enslaving the colonists, all colonists, white and black. They didn't care. That's what I'm trying to say. It wasn't a racial issue, believe me. So, and then he says here, that, for enslave you and reduce your families to distress by heavy taxation. Republicans want no tribute liars. They want no ship ocean liars. They want no refused kings for lords. They want no Varick to lord it over them. They want no Jones for senator, who fought with the British against the Americans, because he was a British Tory Democrat, in time of war. But they want in their place such men as Thomas Jefferson and Clinton, who fought their country's battles in the year 1776 to establish this country. Okay? That's the true republicanism that this nation was founded upon. Okay? And that's the truth. These are the true facts of that time that clearly you're ignorant and don't want to take the time to do the due diligence to understand. And mind you as well, like I said, many black Americans in the Revolutionary War fought for freedom, liberty, and the establishment of this country. And many of those free blacks who fought in the Revolutionary War to establish this nation, they continued to live on free in this nation afterward, because they were free blacks at the time of the Revolutionary War. Like I say, and understanding your ignorant small little mind, you think every black person was a slave. No, that's not true. That's not true. Matter of fact, the population of free blacks always outnumbered the population of slave blacks in America or anywhere in the world. That's a fact. You're just ignorant. Okay? But anyway, let's move forward here a little bit more. George Washington now. You mentioned about George Washington. Now, as I said, did he own slaves? Yeah. Everybody owned slaves. Did he own just black slaves? No. He also owned, most people don't know this, that people of wealth like George Washington, and if you really do your due diligence, you'll find, this is the facts of truth, Thomas Jefferson, you mentioned him. In truth, there's a love story of Jefferson with a black woman. And so you understand, too, as well, which we're going to go in forward here a little bit so you, Dr. Ritchie, can get an understanding, see if your little peon brain can capture this, okay? After the Revolutionary War, the normal establishment of what was the law and the order and process of rules, process, social conduct, and the way people conducted themselves was established as what it was under British rule. It was illegal then to free a slave who was considered like a purchased slave because of Anthony Johnson. If you purchased a slave, He was a slave for all his natural life, or her natural life, white or black, did not matter. It was illegal under British rule. It would take time, and mind you, many free blacks who owned slaves argued this very case. Many black, this was the hard part for the Republican colonists who wanted slavery abolished. It was like, they would raise the issue, it's just horrible what you're doing to the black, and then the blacks come be like, hey, we got slaves too, man. You ain't taking our slaves, no, this blah, blah, blah. Now remember that case where, hey, it's my property. You don't realize that, right? Free blacks were fighting for their property too. They wanted to keep their slaves just as much as the Tory scumbag Democrats in the South. They wanted to keep their slaves too. Maybe you ought to do a little due diligence. Look into this and get out of your fantasy little bubble world. I mean, because you're ridiculous, and you're leading a lot of black Americans to be ridiculous. And you're doing nothing but causing the racial systemicness in this nation with your idiocy. Your total pea-brain little idiocy of your fallacies of your wanting history to be what it is that you believe, when in fact you believe a bunch of lies that are doing nothing but further dividing this nation and depriving that of true you're depriving thousands of black Americans of true pursuit of happiness, of which they have under the true Constitution and principles and founding origins of this nation. You're leading them to believe what you believe, which is depriving them of the truth. And you're an idiot for it. You're a sellout, you're an idiot, and you don't even know it. You're a puppet on a string to the true Democrats who love people like you, because you're a damn fool. But anyway, understand this. So, like I said, with Thomas Jefferson, he had a black woman who he loved. And, he couldn't free her. He had children with her and everything. I don't know if you do your due diligence on it. You might want to look into that. And that's just the way it was. And the same now, too, understand this. Jefferson and Washington both owned white slaves. Yeah. Because you know what? When they, like I say, slavery was prevalent and a normal thing in that time. And it was commonplace that a lot of people, when they would go over, they would spend the extra money for white slaves to be their house servants in areas. Like, the colonists, you had the Tory that lived in Pennsylvania, New York, and stuff like that. They actually didn't want to bring, it was hard. They couldn't have black slaves because people ridiculed that in the northern colony areas. The original 13 colony areas were always free. And they really, but you know what? If you bought white female slaves and you had them as house servants, people didn't question it. They didn't question it. As long as you treated them good, they didn't question it. But like I said, you don't realize there's a lot of cases where the mistreatment of these women who were after brought as servants or whatever, and then they were sexually being abused and beaten, whatever, by the Tory slaveholders of these white female slaves, and as well even men slaves. Believe it or not, there's well, that's another video. I'll get into it. But anyway, so you understand, George Washington right here, the decision to free his slaves. George Washington, you might want to read into it. He had given a declaration to free all his slaves. There's actual letters in the Federal Archives from his slaves. Some of his slaves that he had in the holdings that they never really felt like slaves. They felt like family. And I know you go, oh, here we go with that. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. It's the truth, man. It's the truth. Not everybody was a Tory Democrat who tortured and tormented their slaves. Not everybody was an Anthony Johnson, black free man, who raped their own female slaves to impregnate them so they could sell their children. Okay? Not everybody was inhumane. Okay? And that's what I don't think you get. I understand you want an excuse to why you're a loser in life and why you feel so inferior, but your inferior complex is one that you manifested in your own mind by buying the lies of the Democratic Party, which you don't even realize what an idiot you are, because you're a black Democrat. That's the other funny thing. You're a black Democrat. You do know that it was the Tory, British loyalist, elitist, scumbag, slavery-loving, no-good pieces of shit who formed in 1828 the Democratic Party, right? You do know that, right? Yeah, you probably don't. But anyway, let's go forward here. So here we got abolitionialism. So you understand abolitionialism right here. I'm just going to read a little bit of this so you can. And like I said, I'll include links to this so you can do your due diligence right here. Most organized political and social movements to end slavery did not begin until the mid-18th century. The sentiments of the American Revolution and equality evoked the Declaration of Independence, rallied many black Americans toward the revolutionary cause and their own hopes of emancipation. Both enslaved and free blacks fought in the Revolutionary War on both sides. So, and then mind you, there is, I like this here, I'll include this link because you got links to where you can actually find historical evidential facts. Which might be letters of those free blacks that they wrote, home to family and stuff during the war, so you know this is real. This is not some made up character, okay? Just want to touch on that. Okay, but here we got, now we move on, right? The terms Tory, Loyalist, Royalist, or Kingsmen were used by patriots to label those who remain loyal to the mother country, Britain. So understand now, give you a quick brief, real quick. After the Revolutionary War, the Patriot Americans won that war. The nation, as you can see here, this is a map that reflects slave states and free states in the colony areas upon the Declaration of Independence, from the time of the Declaration of Independence forward. And what you have to understand is, if you look at this right here, at that point right there is important. See that right there? The majority of the nation was slaves allowed, because the Tory controlled a big portion, and they were a big in power here. And the Tory were the richest here, and richest people. And then after the Revolutionary War, the Tories became, pay attention to me now, especially you, Dr. Rich, pay attention now, because I'm going to explain to you something very important. After the Revolutionary War, the Tory claimed the lands they were managing for King George III as their own property. And overnight with that, they became the largest landowners in the nation. That's why you see all that red. You see, those were previously lands owned by the king. They could only work as servants for the king over those lands, managing the plantation and organizing the slaves to do the labor to get him his produce. Now that the Revolutionary War was over and King George had no more say here, they claimed those big blocks of farming lands as their own. And overnight they became the wealthiest, biggest landowners in the nation. And as well, they became the majority slaveholders in the nation, because they also claimed all those slaves under previous British law as their property. Yeah, can you believe that? Can you believe that? And you know what? It was the British Tory loyalists who had done that, who in 1828 formed the Democratic Party, which was formed as a pro-slavery party to protect slave owners' right in the institution of slavery so that it could continue on and be expanded across the nation as it developed. The Democrats wanted slavery. They didn't want to end it. It was the Republicans who wanted to end slavery, and that's a fact. Now, as you look at this map here, you can see this map is changing, and it's changing by dates, 1858, 1861. It's going to go back right now to the original. Pay attention. 1789. You see that? Little blue areas were the free states. The red areas were controlled by the Tory British loyalists, were the slave states. As you watch this progression, you notice that the free states expand. Okay, in the beginning there was 8 slave states, 5 free states. Okay, and then eventually it becomes neutral. It becomes very neutral. As you see down here at the bottom, right here where this mouse is, you see how it's progressively showing how many states free, how many, and then here you have 1858, 15, 17 free states, 15 slave states. By 1861, 19 free states, 15. So the free states were progressively growing. The only resistance to that was the Democrats. They didn't want to give up slavery. And the hard part about it was, too, in a political position, was that you had a massive population of free blacks, not only in the South, but in the northern areas. Like, there was a colonist in North Carolina, Ellison. I don't have this up. Let me just see. I'm just going to, give me 1 minute. Here it is right here. Where are we at? Here, and here we go, okay. Okay, so I have this here is on Ellison, okay. Blacks owning blacks, the story of William Ellison. Now, there's some things here, you know, because as I was doing, I didn't look into you much, Dr. Ritchie, but a little bit of looking into you. I noticed back during early 2000s, it was showing that you had great support for Keith Ellison, who ran as the first black Muslim congressman in the United States. Well, just want you to know, this is his ancestors. His ancestors were slave owners, slave traders, and slave breeders, and some of the largest in the land. Okay? And I just want you to understand that. So, and maybe he's not aware, but I've done my due diligence on him, and I found, yes, this is his family ancestry. Keith Ellison, who was the first black Islamic Muslim congressman in the United States, Democrat, was also, his ancestors are this William Ellison right here, who was a free black man who owned more black slaves than any white person in America, or the United States when it became the United States. He was a slave. He was another man who actually did the same things as what was known to be done by Anthony Johnson. But Ellison, it was really known. You can look up the due diligence on the facts. He would literally have sexual relations with many of his female slaves to impregnate them to be able to breed more slaves to sell to the British Tory or the Democrats. Because in 1812, we banned the importation of slaves. In 1812, upon banning the importation of slaves from a foreign country into ours, it increased the amount of breeding slaves in this country. Another thing I didn't bring up here was that another person after 1812 who took advantage of slavery and breeding slaves for profit and trade was the American Indians. Yeah, you can look up a thing called Black Slave, Red Master. Just search that, you'll get the whole gist of the story. I remember the news commentator doing that, and I used to have the video clip somewhere in my archives. I just don't, I didn't remember to bring it up. This just things coming to mind right now. Where I have that original news clip from back in like '74, where he had done the thing on it, but then he got crushed by the Democrats. They didn't want people to know that, oh my God, the Indians are like, come on, don't tell them that we were slave breeders and slave owners too. Because I can tell you right now, if you look into the truth of it, like I mentioned in one of my comments on your video, Dr. Ritchie, the only people crying on the Trail of Tears were the black slaves carrying all the Indian stuff for them. Trust me, those people are no innocent people when it comes to the matter of slavery and breeding slaves and selling and trading in slaves. The American Indians were very big in it. But anyway, black slave owner William Ellison, like I say, this is going back to, this is 1857 on the approach to the Civil War. He was a man who actually wanted to give his slaves to fight in the Civil War for the goddamn Confederacy. Yeah, he wanted to give his slaves to fight, and he was willing to fight too to keep slavery because that was his trade. He made the family, the whole Ellison family, they were wealthy off of slave trade. And this is the truth. So, you know, I'll include links to this here, and then I remembered it and I brought it up. Economic inequality, free blacks, racism, slavery is the thing. Human trafficking, by him. It was on March 26, 1850, William Ellison wrote to his son, Henry. He speaks about how many slaves he owns in his letter to his son. We have the letters and these things. Like I said, I'll include this links, the actual letters in the Federal Archives about these matters. And like I say, that people like Ellison, because in truth and honesty, when you really read the newspapers and you really read the only people who mentioned about black and racism, color thing, was the Democrats. Among the original colonies and even the rest of the world, it was never really a racial issue of white and black. It was just an inhumanity issue. But the Democrats, for some reason, need to do like the Muslims, and they learned from the Muslims. You know, there was Democrats who went over to the Arab nations, and it was the Barbary Muslims who showed them how to discipline, train, and break slaves. Really, there was a Democrat who wrote a book on how to break slaves, came back learning from them on how to break a slave and make him be an obedient slave. And so, they were the ones too that made it like they learned the racial divisional thing, the white and black thing from the Muslims, the Democrats. So they were the ones pushing for it. Which as we go forward, we're going to prove this to you as we even go forward too, because the history does have a clear record of the facts of truth. Truth. Facts of truth. You ever hear that, Dr. Ritchie, huh? Not just the truth, like the Democrats want to tell you their truth. Truth and facts. Truth supported by facts. That's very important. You can't forget the facts, Dr. Ritchie, because the facts are what make the truth sustainable. You got to have the facts, man. You got to have the facts. But anyway, like I say, here you are, right? You call yourself Dr. Rashad Ritchie. Doctor, really. Unbelievable. But anyway, we're going to go forward now a little bit here. We're looking into, I don't know what the heck this thing is that popped up. Here we go, close that. No. Oh, give me 1 second. I got something popping up here. I don't know how to close. Maybe I could just refresh that. No, it's not letting me refresh. Oh, here we go. Whig and Tory, okay? So you understand now, the Whig and the Tory, this is just to give you a clue link so people can understand it. The Inconvenient Truth About the Democratic Party. This is a good article. It briefs touches on from a curriculum to say about how, the Democratic Party, and this is something too that shows the fallacy of the lies here. Since its founding in 1829, it was actually 1826. They do have others that say 1828. My due diligence and research shows that the Tory Democrats were considering a political establishment party back in 1826, as evidence within the Federal Archives of letters written among themselves that show this. So I say 1826. A lot of historians say 1828. This article saying 1829. This goes to the fact that his story, their story, and the truth. You see, you got to do your due diligence. And I assure you, the truth is what I have to accept and face. And the truth shows that there was letters in 1826 as the establishment of the Democratic Party. So that's it. And here, in contrast, the Republican Party was founded in 1854. You see, here's more Democratic Party lies. Because I just showed you in the Jefferson poster and with James Madison the facts and truth of what's there's Federal Archives letters that show these things. And those articles I include with that I found online that can justify these things. And I know that the Federal Archives now are online, so I could direct link them right to the evidence of fact. The evidence of fact that supports that being the truth, Dr. Ritchie. The importance of facts. Again, you see, the Republican Party was founded again. Like I said, we go back here, we look. Just so I'm not speaking out of line. I want to make sure, here we go. Right here, 1787. By Madison, the Jeffersonian Republican Party. Okay? Just so you understand. Now, I understand Democrats go, well, that was not the same party. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. See, it was a Bostonist party then. It was a party about standing to the foundation of what we declared in our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. Those principles extended all the way up to the Civil War. And still do to this very day, because I'm a Republican. Don't tell me what the hell I believe. I know what I believe. I know my founding American principles and values. I know what I believe as an American. I know my history. I know who I am. You don't tell me who the hell I am. I know who I am. Especially if you're a goddamn worthless, no good, racist, scumbag, elitist Democrat. You don't tell me who the hell I am as a Republican. Get real. But anyway, now we're going forward again. Where are we at? Whigs and Tory, we went through that. About the truth, the inconvenient truth is this. So you understand, Dr. Ritchie, the Democratic Party, which I know, I think I've seen in your comment back to me, you stated that the Democratic Party has changed platforms. Well, that's the biggest crock of shit I ever heard. And we'll go ahead forward. I don't even have the stuff up yet to prove that, but I'm going to go forward and bring it up as we go so you can get an awakening to things. You talk about awoke, how you say it, awoke? Okay, I'm gonna woke you. That's what I'm gonna do. Woke you. Okay, you want to talk like that with your stupid Southern draw, old Southern slang kind of thing to make yourself sound more black. What a jerk! You're such an idiot, dude. But anyway, 1829, the Democratic Party. 1828, whenever it was, there was formed as a pro-slavery party to protect the rights of slave owners and the right to expand slavery throughout the expanding new states and territories of the United States. The United States of America, the Constitutional Republic, and all its new territories being developed were being developed with slavery being abolished. All of the states that were under full control of the Constitutional Republic of the Republicans of the United States of America had already abolished slavery. That was how we reached the point to where we look at this map and we see by the time of the Revolution, Civil War approaching, why there's 17 free states and 15 slave states. The states kept expanding by the Republicans of the Constitutional Republic of the United States abolishing slavery as their power and position of authority would take over the nation as the true governing force here. But that's what led to the Civil War. And that's where we're getting up right now. So we have here Andrew Jackson is claimed to be the founder of the Democratic Party. Now, there's a reason the Democrats like to use Jackson. Because in truth, Jackson would be like the first DINO. He was a Democrat in name only. He didn't really understand the whole principle because he actually stood against slavery. Okay, he was not like his predecessors who would hijack the party, and this becomes self-evident as we move forward. We see this, the Civil War. This is where all the Democratic Party eventually leads to, the Civil War. On the approach to the Civil War, the Democratic Party had literally drafted its own constitution, designed its own national flag, raised its own national army, and had been preparing to divide itself from the nation by succeeding and waging war against the United States in an attempt to overthrow the United States. And the Democratic Party, the first president was Democrat Jefferson Davis. Now, you don't find Davis mentioned anywhere in the American list of presidents because he was not a president of the United States. He was a president of the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states. And Jefferson Davis was a Democrat. The Confederate slave states were the Democratic parties. They were organized and created by the Democratic Party. And Davis was, as you can see here, a political party, conservative Southern Democrat. Now understand, a lot of people and many of the ignorant black and white Democrats, when they hear conservative, they assume it means Republican. No. Conservative just simply means that of traditional ways. And when they say conservative Southern Democrat, they mean that of traditional ways, and that he supported 100% slavery. He supported that black people were inferior and should always be enslaved. He supported the Democratic Party's constitution that made it constitutional right to own black people as slaves, and it made it the constitutional law that anyone born black was born a slave. That's what the Democrats wanted. And he believed in those things conservatively. That's what that meant. He's nothing of republicanism in this man whatsoever. He was a no good racist, elitist scumbag. But anyway, the Democratic Party flag, the original of here was called the Stars and Bars. Okay, this was created by a German artist named Nikolai Mochel. Now, there's letters in the archives between Davis and other members of the Confederate slave states, the Democrats, where they did not like this. They didn't want a flag that looked like the United States of America flag. They wanted nothing to do with America because they were not Americans. They were British loyalists, scumbag Tories is what they were. And they'd always been loyal to Great Britain and wanted to throw it over. But this was the second Confederate flag, though a lot of people want to say, oh, that's just a battle flag. No, that's propaganda bullshit made up by Woodrow Wilson coming around 1915. That's the original Confederate slave states flags. And that flag right there, that blue X is not an X. It's a sideways cross of St. Andrews. That's the cross of the loyalists to Scotland. And the red represents the loyalists of England to the kings of Great Britain. That's a British loyalty flag is what that is. That's not a battle flag. And they want you believe it's a battle flag because they want to hide the truth of it. I didn't bring up certain things to that, but if you do your due diligence, you'll find out that's a sideways cross across St. Andrews, which is the loyalty flag of the Scottish to the kings of Great Britain. And what the Democrats were trying to do was send a message to Great Britain that they were still loyal to them in hopes that Great Britain would become allied with the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states and help them overthrow the United States. Their last attempt was in the War of 1812, the Second Revolutionary War, if you're familiar with American history, of which the Tory Democrat scumbags as well went and aided Great Britain in that war in an attempt to overthrow the country back then from Britain. But Britain was considering aiding, you can do your due diligence on this, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just speaking from what I know, and it's a fact. Britain was considering aiding the Democrats in the Civil War for the overthrow of the United States. The only thing that stopped them was Russia. You see, Russia as well was a mighty force in this world and had a big navy and a big military. And Russia really liked a person, what we're going to get into as we move forward a little bit. But I just want to make the point clear that this was the Confederate flag of the Confederate States of America, what they called themselves back then, the Democrats. And that flag is a loyalty flag to Great Britain. It has nothing to do with America, Americanism, or Southern pride whatsoever. And as we go forward, we're gonna prove that even further. This is a Republican Party. The Republican Party existed under this right here was at the time 34-star flag of the Civil War era. Back in 1861, only had 34 stars on it to represent the 34 states of the United States, of which the Democrats had seized a good portion of those states and tried to claim them as their own under the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states. We had to fight the war to take those states back. And that's what we did. Abraham Lincoln was the Republican president during the Civil War. In case you ignorant DINO white and black Democrats didn't know it, that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, not a damn Democrat. Okay, now some other important people, like this, I believe in 1859, this is John Brown's last speech. John Brown, I don't know if you're familiar with him, was a great Republican abolitionist at the time. He led a rebellion with the slaves against it. But and he was one of the first, the Democrats actually executed him for treason. He was a Republican executed by the Democrats for treason for leading a slave revolt in his abolitionist movement wanting slavery abolished. This is something I would like to talk to Dr. Jackson about, maybe not aware of how many white people oppose slavery. And in truth, you ungrateful, no good son of a bitch, how you don't even recognize that your ass wouldn't be free today if it wasn't for white Republicans, okay? If you want to turn it into a racial issue. Literally, it was white Republicans who freed everybody from slavery. White people and black people, you ignorant son of a bitch. But anyway, right here, this was, I don't know if you're familiar with the story of John Brown, But the thing I want to put here is he said, I believe that to have interfered as I have done, as I have always freely admitted I have done, in behalf of his despised poor, was not wrong but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for the furtherance of the ends of justice and mingle my blood further with the blood of my children and with the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments, I submit, so let it be done. Now notice he doesn't say black slaves. He says slaves. You see, and that's what I think, Dr. Richie, you don't understand. Black people were not the only slaves. Really, in all honesty, they weren't. That's a Democratic propagated bullshit lie. The truth of facts of history, facts, the things I know you don't like to look at, prove this unquestionably, not only just here but around the world. Okay? It was just that in the new America, in the new founding United States of America, there was not as many white slaves as there was black slaves. Blacks were the majority of slaves, but I explained to you why. The kings of Great Britain were important. All black slaves and a minority of white slaves that would only be, the only white slaves were like Irish women, Scottish women that were bought and purchased as sex slaves and house servant slaves by the British Tory. And even some of, sadly, the colonist areas who bought their wives. They bought their wives as sex slaves, white women as sex slaves, and then married them and took them as their wives. And this is known fact in history. There's evidence beyond abundance of that proved these things. Okay, but anyway, I just wanted to mention him because I like this guy. I think he was a great hero of our history. John Brown was a great Republican abolitionist, in my opinion, a great American. As we move forward now, we were just talking about with the thing with a lot of people get confused and they like to think that the Confederate flag represents the North and the South. Well, let me tell you something. The Democratic Party's Tory scumbag elitist racist bastards they were. There was no North and South. That was just a regional area that, the farming districts were mostly in the South. That's what the Tory Democrats controlled. But in the South as well as the nation since 1776 forward had been a lot of principle, valued, true patriot Americans had resided now in the South. And the Democrats, upon their long plan since 1828 to form their own nation and attempt to overthrow the United States, was in the workings and plans. Thomas Jefferson Davis admits this in his own book he wrote when he was in prison. So, this is the facts. If you ever read Jefferson's book, The Rise and the Fall of the Confederacy, they admit how long they were planning an attempted overthrow of the United States of America. And even their own letters of succession state 10 years prior or what have you, how long they have suffered the affliction of the Northern Republicans trying to deprive them of their legal right to their slaves. They say it in their own succession letters, some of the states. So understand now, and now if it was a Southern thing and a Northern thing, they wouldn't hang their own Southerners, would they? Yeah, they would. Right here's the great hanging of Gainesville, Texas. And this is something I bring up because, a lot of people don't realize that on this day, I believe it was, they say 41, it was actually 57 men who were white Republicans, abolitionists who didn't agree with slavery and didn't agree with the succession from the United States, and they wanted slavery abolished. And the Democrats went in and riled them up and hung them. It was one of the most gracious hangings in American history. Was actually 57 Republican white Americans hung in the trees in Texas. And then the other things they don't tell you about this, due diligence will reflect. They went to these people's homes afterward, dragged their wives and children out in the street, and as well killed them and burned their homes to the ground. This was how they influenced those in the South to not question the Democrats, to live in fear, to do as they're told and support the Confederacy, or that's what would happen to you. They were terrorists, no good scumbag, elitist bastards is what they were, the Democrats. They were racist scumbags who, and as you can see here, it wasn't really a racial issue. It was an ideology issue. They were elitist scumbags who believed they were above everybody, white or black or anybody. And they believed that all had to serve them and all should be subject to being servants to them and serve them as slaves. They were just an elitist scumbag organization of people. And this is what you got to understand. These were white men they hung, not black. And as we progress forward, you're going to see this continues. Okay? And this is what you don't understand as well, it seems, Dr. Rich. You obviously haven't done your due diligence, but as we go forward, we're going to get into that. Now, this right here, I'll include a story. You can see the great hanging of Gainesville, Texas. You can do your own due diligence and research on it. It's an event that proves that this was not a Southern-Northern real issue, because these were Southern men and Southern families who were slaughtered because they wanted slavery abolished. Okay, and they were Republicans. The Civil War was a Democratic-Republican war. It was Democratic, no good elitist scumbag Democrats versus that of constitutional independence, morals and values of that of what we declared as a Republican constitutional nation of the United States of America. The Republicans, that's who we were. Okay. Now when we were talking about with the Confederate flag, the Democrats wanted to send that loyalty. Now, this right here is Cassius Marcellus Clay. That's the guy Muhammad Ali was named after. That dumb idiot, Muhammad Ali, is as ignorant as this guy here, Dr. Jackson, because Muhammad Ali sadly died never knowing the truth of Islam and the truth of the lies he was told. But like I say, you can go back and watch my video right here, The Lies of the Nation of Islam. Wait until you see the unquestionable truth. I'll include a link to that. You can go ahead and watch that, and you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about. Let me get my place back to where I'm at now. Where are we at? Okay, so here we go. Okay, so here we go. Marcellus Cassius Clay was a great Republican abolitionist himself too, and I love this guy because he's a true Republican. I'll tell you what, the majority of Republicans today are disgraceful, no good, worthless, goddamn cowards. All of you. Really, you drop to your knees and kiss the ass of anybody. You're a bunch of people who love the enjoyment of the prosperity of this nation and your pursuit of happiness for wealth and leisure and what have you. But boy, if it comes to stand up for it and fight for it, you're a bunch of worthless goddamn scumbag cowards, all of you. But you know what? The true Americans were the Americans who were like in Washington, D.C., January 6th, and those who took the 33 state capitals around the state at the same time. Like you hear all this stuff about the insurrection in Washington, January 6th. They don't tell you that as well. 33 state capitals were taken as well by state militia and patriot members of the true Republicans of this nation who have had enough of you goddamn treasonous scumbag Democrats of the political establishment. Not so much the DINOs of the public who are just Democrat name only idiots like this guy here, Dr. Ritchie, who don't know the truth. They're just indoctrinated idiots. I'm not talking about you, because it's like with Muslims. I don't hate Muslims. Muslims are just indoctrinated people who don't know the truth. The same as Dinos, who are Democrats in name only, that are idiots like Dr. Jackson that just don't know the truth. And they're just so freaking stupid and lazy they don't take the time to actually do the due diligence to learn the truth so they can know what they're really talking about. The way this guy starts out his video that we started watching, you know, about, oh, how he is and knows people, and you're an idiot, man. Anybody who knows world history, culture, and the facts of religious history in this nation and the world, you are nothing but a goddamn peanut head idiot. You know that? You're a damn disgraceful idiot. To all of humanity, of white and black, you're a goddamn idiot. Really, shut your freaking mouth, learn the truth, and like I say, if anything I'm telling you is not the truth, you let me know, you freaking idiot, because you're a disgraceful idiot. And I don't like people like you, because you know what? You're the very cause of the division, upset, and deprivation of people having a proper pursuit under our constitutional great nation to their happiness. You're the very cause of it. You're a no-good sellout scumbag who capitalizes on it for your own goddamn gain. You don't give a damn about white people, black people, or any people or Americans. You're all in it for yourself, obviously. But maybe you're not. I can't really say. I don't know you, but that's how you appear to be. But if you're not, do some goddamn due diligence, learn the truth, and get real. Get freaking real, because you're not helping anybody, and you're definitely not helping America. And I'm an American, and I don't like disgraceful pieces of shit like you destroying, demeaning, or disgracing my country on the basis of your freaking lies because you're too lazy to learn the truth. Anyway, Marcellus Cassius Clay was a great Republican man. He never owned a slave in his life. He gave his whole life dedicated to freeing slaves. He established schools in the North. He taught black runaway slaves how to read and to learn a trade and help them get jobs in the free states as they were fleeing up. You know, you remember the Underground Railroad thing like that, Dr. What's your name again? Dr. Ritchie? I knew it. I was just afraid I might say the wrong name. But, here we are. Okay, we're on Marcellus Cassius Clay. Marcellus Cassius Clay was the guy Muhammad Ali was named after. It was now the reason that Great Britain, we're back to the Confederate flag, the flag was a symbolism off to Great Britain to show them that the Democrats were still loyal to Great Britain and they wanted Great Britain to come in and allied with them to aid them in the overthrow of the United States Republic of the United States of America. Great Britain would have done that. But you see, Cassius Marcellus Clay was appointed by Abraham Lincoln as the ambassador to Russia. And he had gone over and worked out a deal with Russia. And Russia informed Great Britain and France that if you do anything to aid or assist or allied the Democratic Party's Confederate slave states, that they would ally with the Republicans of the free states, and they would fight with them against Great Britain. Great Britain at that time, which a lot of people aren't aware unless you know world history, there was a lot of world wars going on. There was a lot of conflict too. It was right then with Great Britain too, battling with the Islamic Muslims. You had the Turks then arising up. You had issues going on with what is modern day Germany today going on with Britain. A lot of rebellion. They just got out of a lot of war situation because they were total totalitarianism as well. They were out trying to rule the world just like all totalitarians do, and they were pretty depleted at the time, and they knew they were in no position to take on the United States of America and Russia. They just couldn't do it. Even with France on their side, they couldn't do it, and they knew it, and France knew it. So pretty much Great Britain and France took neutrality in that war and stayed out of it. Honestly, to be honest with you, if we didn't have Russia backing us at that time, thanks to Marcellus Cassius Clay, who was ambassador with Russia and got them allied with us, we might not be where we are today. We might not be this great United States of America we are today, Dr. Ritchie, of which you obviously don't think is a great nation, but I got news for you. Had the Democrats won that war, you would be a slave. And there wouldn't be a goddamn thing anybody could ever do about it in this country. Because you know why? Under the Democratic Party's Constitution, they made it a constitutional right to own anyone born black as a slave. And they made it a constitutional law that no one could free anyone born black. So it was a mandated constitutional law under the Democratic Party's Constitution of their Confederate slave states that black people were slaves. You ought to be more grateful for Republicans, I'll tell you right now, you ignorant bastard. You have no idea of the reality and what an idiot you look like to a true American Republican, black or white. Because I'll tell you what, there's a lot of great conservative, true Republican, black Americans out there too who are looking at you like a piece of shit, the piece of shit you are. Because you know what a piece of shit is? A piece of shit is somebody who speaks as if they're speaking the truth, but in truth never did the due diligence to know if what they're saying is the truth. And all you're doing is causing more harm. You're a disgraceful piece of shit. Because as educated as you come off, there's no excuse for it. There's just no excuse. And by you doing what you're doing, you're a piece of shit. And if you don't like that, too damn bad. I'm an American. I'll tell you exactly what I think of you. You're a piece of shit. Hopefully, you'll get the gist of what I'm saying, and hopefully I'll offend you enough to want to go and prove me wrong, which will make you learn the truth. And you will no longer be a piece of shit. You might actually regroup yourself to redeem yourself to be a true American and turn around and do the right thing for this country and all people in it. But anyway, let's move forward. So right here we have John Brown. We mentioned him earlier. John Brown was the first American to be executed for treason, while Preston was right here. We talked about him, the guy. Okay, but anyway, too, this is an image of I'll include this video. This is an image of my video, The Lies of the Nation of Islam. I'll include a link to that, which I recommend, Dr. Brown. Maybe you want to, or not Dr. Brown, Dr. Ritchie, you might want to read or watch. And then too, on that, like I say, anybody watch this video, if there's anything I'm saying is not the truth, you let me know. Okay, I've been studying world history, cultures, religious history, and now for over 40 years. 40 years. Okay, and I know the only thing I give a damn about is the truth. Okay, and it's not my opinion either. I'm going to tell you what, a lot of things I say, a lot of things in history that I had to face prior, like many, I had believed family members, I had believed people I knew, because I didn't think people would lie to me, but I found out too, they didn't intentionally lie to me. They themselves just were like Dr. Ritchie here. They were ignorant idiots that never took the time to do the due diligence to find out if what they were told was the truth, and they just kept repeating the lies they were told. Okay, and that makes you angry. It does, makes me angry. But anyway, we'll move forward here. The Great Hanging in Gainesville, Texas, we touched on that. Now, the Civil War service, this is something, Dr. Ritchie, I'd like to talk to you about. So-called Dr. Ritchie, right? Such a smart guy. Okay, this is the Civil War service by population in the South and the North. This represents how many were killed, wounded, captured, or missing. Okay, killed. 596,670 white Republicans died to free black slaves. Yeah. So let me ask you something. Who's going to pay reparations to their family for their loss? Huh? Who's going to pay reparations for the tens of millions prior to them, from the founding of this nation up to that time for 80 years? Who's going to pay for all those abolitionists that fought to reach that point, to where finally slavery was abolished? Who's going to pay reparations to all those in the free territories and states that were established of those. And you don't think that those white Republicans were dealing with the harshism the same as the black slaves? I got news for you. You definitely have no goddamn idea. Because it was a constant civil war from the founding of this nation forward with the British Tory Democrats. And it was a constant bloodshed between that of white Republicans and racist scumbag Democrats. And it still goes on to this very day. And it's still waging on right now. And that's a damn fact. But I just want you to take a good look at that right there, Dr. Ritchie. And realize how many white men fought for freedom for all to have slavery abolished in this country. And they were Republicans, not Democrats. Your ignorant, no good ass is a Democrat. You are actually part of the goddamn Confederate slave states. What an idiot you are, right? To be out here talking about slavery and equality and this. What, you're a freaking member of the establishment of institutional slavery in this country. The Democrats. What a jerk-off. You are such a jerk-off. Unbelievable. But anyway, let's move forward. So you know, after the Civil War, which the Republicans won, we established and amended the Constitution with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were opposed by the Democrats 100%. They didn't want nothing whatsoever in giving any rights to black people. They were racist scumbags. And you know what? The facts of history don't lie. Here are the facts of history right here. This is the Almanac. How Republicans and Democrats voted on key constitutional amendments. So as you can see right here, that it says right here, and this is a fact, you can look it up. There's actually, we have the voting records in the federal archives that you can look at if you question this. Understand, I have to use these kind of things that are online because we're doing an online video. Internet's the only way I can show you of something, okay? And it's either this or a printed book I'll hold up, which makes it real hard to see. But I've done the due diligence to find things online that justify the facts and the truth I know to be the facts, because our archives have the facts of evidence that are unquestionable. And these statements right here are fact to those that evidence that exists in our federal archives. If you want to go look up the actual archives, you can do that as well. Okay, you can do that as well. Go to the federal archives, you can pull up the records right online. Okay, but here, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery supported 100% by Republicans, 23% of Democrats. Now, mind you, this right here, if you do your due diligence, which I have done, you will find that 23% were Southern Democrats who were forced into the Democratic Party in the Confederacy by threat of being killed, like the men they hung in the Great Hanging in Gainesville, Texas. They were people who cowered down and submitted out of fear of being hung. So, you know, and then after the war, when they realized it was safe, but mind you, how do we know this? How do we know this? We know this I know this from Federal Archives records of newspapers in the southern states, Alabama, Kentucky, and Georgia. Some of that 13% population of the Democrats, after voting in favor for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, upon returning home, were killed by the Democrats. Because the Democrats didn't stop their tyrant terrorist freaking ways on this country, which was self-evident. Because after the Civil War, Dr. Ritchie, so you know, the Democrats were the ones who founded the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan is an ancient order out of that of the British Loyalists. Most people don't know that. Yeah, it's an ancient order of that of the King's elitist status knights, like the Knights of Knights thing. That's why they have the Knights and all that, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and all that. That's where it all comes from, this royalty of monarchy elitism. But they formed the Ku Klux Klan. They also formed the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts were an organization that would suppress the now free black Americans from exercising their rights. They would go in and terrorize them, beat them, burn down their communities, you name it. They were just a terrorist organization. That's what the Democratic Tories have always been, and still are to this very day. It never ceases with them. As history goes on, we see it. Now, we can see the effects, like I'm going to say to you right now, Dr. Ritchie, some things you might not understand. So, and I'm about to show this to you, and I want you to try to comprehend this in your little pea brain of your freaking ignorance, okay? Right here, all the way up until Grover Cleveland after the Civil War in 1884, was the first Democratic president elected. History reflects something of the impact of the Democratic Party, its elitist, scumbag, racist, superialism ways, and how it affects. And it also does, right here, reflect so you understand that really, in truth, even with the Democrats, it was not a racial issue, it was an elitism issue. A monarchy, elitist position of totalitarianism is what it really comes down to. These people are, and it still is to this very day, because the very heads of the true Democratic Party establishment are the same. You see, America, real quick, I'm going to go off here. America is 245 years new this year. That's all we are. when you look at like Great Britain and the establishments of the royal monarchies that existed in England, France, and Germany, and what have you, you can trace a history of 4,000 years. When you look at the Arab kings, you can go back and trace a history to 7,000 years. You look at the Egyptian governance of totalitarianism, you can trace back 9,000 years. Okay? And this is what I'm trying to say. We're 245 years new in the world as America. These totalitarian world leaders and their monarchies and elitism of pharaohs and demigods and what have you, and their Islamic friggin' cults that they have with the Muslims and their demigod prophets and what have you, these people have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years in their pursuit for world domination and control and enslaving all humanity to serve them. Okay, they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years. America's 245 years new. The establishment of the Democratic Party, one thing that they do say that is true, their order of establishment in totalitarianism is one of the longest standing forms of government in history. We see very quickly in the first rising of tribal communities in ancient history, going back 10, 11, 13,000 years ago, that following this, it was like, you know, and I attribute this is in my own opinion to some things here, is my view on things from my own study and my opinion. This is not something I can state in fact, it's just my opinion, and I'd like to make that clear so you understand that. But, you know, today you have, like we know in record, you have Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Tesla, Albert Einstein, geniuses, right, that we know of. And I'm only referencing these things because, you know, people understand that there was not just geniuses in this time. Back in ancient time, there was geniuses as well. And I imagine those geniuses probably looked at the normal common sense civilization of humanity and were like, Jesus, I could really control the world because these people are idiots, because they were geniuses. And there's obviously evil geniuses. And these were the men who came up with the idea of totalitarian world domination and control. Evil geniuses. And they persisted to be throughout history, and they still persist to be to this day, self-evidently, because the majority of the world is still controlled by democratic democracies of totalitarianism rulers, of elitism, superialism, and monarchies, and demigods. So that's just the way it is. It still exists to this very day. So it's self-evident. But the thing that I'm talking about with Grover Cleveland was the first Democrat since the Civil War. We see an event that takes place that shows, one, it was not really a racial issue of black and white. According to the elitist scumbag no good Democrats, believe me, they don't discriminate against who they treat with their inhumanity. They treat everybody equal. And this we can see as we go forward right here. Now, I want to show you right here, you see that the year that Grover Cleveland, the first Democrat since the Civil War, was elected in 1884. At this time here, you had a large population of Republicans. And those Republicans during this time had helped many of the black, now free black Americans, establish communities, grow in prosperity and jobs and education and what have you. And the Democrats, they couldn't stand it. They just couldn't stand it. And once, like idiots, the people forgot. And mind you, they used the Ku Klux Klan and the Red Shirts as terrorist organizations to push their way through for corrupt elections to get Grover Cleveland elected. And once he got elected, boy, did the Democrats show again their true colors. Because you see it right here. This is lynching by year and race. You can look these up. These are factual numbers. This right here is on a site that's called Law2 at umkc.edu. Okay, and these are, you can look it up. These are, due diligence on this does not lie. So like I said, the thing we're going to look at right here is you got Grover Cleveland like 1884. I want you to notice something that happens in 1884. Look right here. Whites lynched. 160. Blacks lynched, 51. Now, the other thing about these lynchings right here, Dr. Ritchie, that you might want to take into consideration, if you look throughout the years, you recognize that, yeah, pretty evened up. They hanged just as many white Republicans as they did blacks. The Democrats were lynching just as many white Republicans as they were black. No different than a great hanging in Gainesville, Texas. These people, they did not discriminate between white and black. It was never a racial issue. It was an ideological issue between elitism and those who the elitist, no-good scumbag Democrats considered to be commoners. But in their view, the commoners, no matter white or black, should serve them and be obedient to them and listen to them. The same as what they do right now. And all you are is another puppet on their string because you're an obedient slave to them. They see you as a slave and you don't even realize it. You're an ignorant ass. Okay, and you're not helping anybody of the black race or people. And I don't know, maybe you are a true Democrat. Maybe you're like Ellison. You were actually one of those. Maybe you're one of them people who would have owned black slaves yourself, you disgraceful piece of shit. I don't know. But I just wanted to point out, 1884, notice this rise in 160 whites being lynched. You know what that was? That was the Ku Klux Klan and the red shirts terrorizing the shit out of white Republicans, trying to make them stop aiding and assisting and helping black free people. And you know what? They didn't want to hear it. Because you look in 1885, 110. They persisted. And then there forward, it just kept persisting. It was pretty equal. Pretty equal. Because in truth, when you look at the newspaper articles and you actually look at the facts of history, it was not really a white and black issue. It was a Republican Democratic Party issue. It was a free, independent national ideology versus that of an elitist ideology. That's what it was. Okay, and then during these times here, from the Civil War forward, and actually from the founding of this nation forward, white and blacks coexisted together as Americans, just as one people, is what we declared. You're just ignorant. You don't want to say and face that fact. You only want to look at the southern area, and it just gets me. It blows my mind. You look at this, like you mentioned Jim Crow, you mentioned the Ku Klux Klan, you mentioned all these things, and then you mentioned Republicans as if they had something to do with that. When it was all founded by the Democrats. And you're a freaking Democrat. You're a black American Democrat. What an idiot you are, Dr. Ritchie. What? How much more stupid can you be in light of these facts? How stupid can you be? Now, I'm a true American Republican. I can tell you right now, I'll do this for you right now, okay? I'm going to do this for you, Dr. Ritchie. I want you to pay attention to how American I am, you son of a bitch, okay? When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate but equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind required that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, so that when every form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, to institute new government, organizing its power in such form, organizing its power in such form that should more secure their future safety and happiness. So you see, that's how American I am. Unlike Joe Biden, who, the thing. I know the thing. I live the thing. I breathe the thing. I am the thing. I'm an American. I love this country. Nothing's going to change that because I know the truth of this country and its founding principles, unlike you ignorant piece of shit. Okay? And it's not because I'm white. White and black has nothing to do with it. We're one people of all equal as Americans. And that's what republicanism is all about. One people of all equal. Like we declared in that Declaration of Independence. Now, there's a lot of Democrats, white and black, clearly don't agree with that. You're one of them. You don't even realize in the way you talk, the way you act, you're nothing but an elitist scumbag yourself who thinks that black people are superior. No different than a Ku Klux Klan white no good scumbag thinks white people are superior. The only difference between you and a Klan member is you're black and he's white. But you both have the same ideology and superialism. That's disgraceful. You're a disgraceful piece of shit. You need to take a good look in the mirror and try and consider that. Now, we're going to just go on and move forward. But like I said, I want you to look at that. Look at that. 1884, you see that? That was a big thing that was noticeable during the time of when this scumbag right here, Grover Cleveland, became president. First Democrat since the Civil War. Boy, did they go off on a tirade with their Ku Klux Klan and red shirts, terrorizing the shit out of this nation. And you know what? Then now, like you say here, this all starts off with your video. You're talking about Confederate monuments, right? It's amazing. You're a Democrat, and you're talking about the Confederate monuments and how it's systemic racism is in these monuments in the Confederacy. You're a Democrat. The Confederacy was the Democrats, you dumbass. Are you not aware of this? The Confederate flag was the Democratic Party's Confederate slave state flag. You're not aware of this? And the Confederate monuments, so you are aware, you dumb, ignorant piece of shit, were all put up by a Democrat. You see, Parks and Recreation. We described it right here. Parks and Recreation. You know who founded Parks and Recreation? Right here, Purpose. The Wilson's Parks and Recreation Department purpose is to plan, organize, and coordinate all comprehensive programs that actively enhance the lives of our citizens, is what they say. We see there the Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, Democrat, Woodrow Wilson is the one who established Parks and Recreations. And in his proud heritage, right here, I want you to, on August 25th, 1916, President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, Democrat, signed the act creating the National Park Service, a new federal bureau and Department of Interior responsible for protecting the 35 national parks and monuments then managed by the department and those yet to be established. Very important, because you know what? If you take a look, these are the places where all the Confederate monuments were established. Amazingly, all those monuments were established starting right here in 1917 with Woodrow Wilson. Did you know prior to Woodrow Wilson there was no Confederate monuments in the United States of America until Democrat Woodrow Wilson was elected in the early 1900s. He's the guy who started putting up, because they were proud, the Democrats. They're proud of their Confederate heritage. They're proud of the Ku Klux Klan. And they're proud of their red shirts. They're proud of their racist ideology and elitism. And they're still the same, very same people to this day who they were then. And this is self-evident and unquestionable. And we'll look at that. We'll see. Like I say right here, look, 1917, 1917, 1970. This shows the military bases that were then named after Confederate soldiers, starting in 1917 with Woodrow Wilson. Down here you got faculties. These faculties start in 1962. Late in the season, the Democrats are still, 1962, very proud. That was like a Lyndon B. Johnson, Ku Klux Klan member out of Texas, 1962. Show how long-standing they held on to their racial roots, okay? And then you look here, you got the monuments, the actual monuments here where it starts out, and they go, and you see them start 1919, 1941, 1960, 1991. Boy, I tell you, it's amazing. These Democrats are so proud of their Confederate heritage. And it's amazing how they established all these things today, and the Confederacy statues and monuments, the Democrats, and then they hide right now, acting like they're all these other people talk about they got to tear them down, and the Democrats play like, oh yeah, let's rip them down, without admitting it was them who put the frickin' things up. And you ask why the Republicans don't want them removed. Look, they're a part of the history, and they've been put up. And it's important, we feel, that people know the truth. I'm telling you right now, that we understand the deception, the inhumanity of the very people who is represented in those monuments, but more so, understand the danger of not knowing the very people who erected those monuments and their position in our government right now, and their ability to afflict humanity and the people of our nation right now and divide us and cause the issues they're causing right now. Because that's what Democrats are real good at. They can create the issue and then present themselves as the very solvers of the problem they created. And that's what they've been doing now since they've been established in this country. Masking who they really are, hiding behind it, giving people what they believe they want in order to gain their favor and control them. The majority of Democratic-controlled communities across this country are deprived of proper education. Their schools are failing. Their communities are nothing but drug-infested, criminal-overrun, economically deprived cities and communities. And why the people keep electing these people is a joke. But the truth of the matter of what we found out in the last election, they're not electing them. It's pretty clear we're a banana republic. The elections are fixed, and they're set in stone, and terrorism is what wins the way. The cowardly Republicans of this nation do not stand up to the vicious terrorist Democrats who will use people like you, Dr. Ritchie, and people of the black communities they control to go out and wage terrorism on people with looting, rioting, and burning down communities and bashing up cars and blocking traffic and disrupting work and threatening the white communities and the white and black communities of the working class Republicans outside those Democratic controlled communities. Because outside, you see, I grew up and raised in Newark in the ghettos. I know what it's like to be in those areas, believe me. I was shot twice before I was freaking 9 years old by stray bullets flying where I grew up. I was stabbed already multiple times by the time I was 10. I know what it's like, how violent it could be in the ghetto cities. I know, because I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I watched my brother knife fight, my oldest brother knife fight. I see my older brother get shot in the stomach. I've seen a lot of shit as a kid in Newark, New Jersey. Okay, so I know. But I also know one thing. I've seen the world on the outside of that. And I see in the humanity of republicanism and the true founding principles of who we are as Americans. And that's what it really comes down to, Dr. Ritchie. Are you an American, or are you an elitist piece of shit? Now, you appear to be an elitist piece of shit, because everything that comes out of your mouth is about black people. Let me tell you something, in all God's honesty and truth, the differential between appearance and people has nothing to do with race. There's only one race, and that's the human race. The differences in appearance are nothing but adaptations to environmental conditions. Black people are black because they're in the deepest part of the tropics and the most heat, and they adapted to be able to survive in that region. Just like Chinese people have slanted eyes because of the angle of ultraviolet rays from the sun hitting. That's the ray that causes you to squint. Their eyes naturally develop to a squint. The same as that those rays hit in the same places that they hit over in Alaska and Hawaii. They all get that squinty eye thing, you know? It's adaptation. Being black, white, or having slanty eyes, or yellow skin, or blue skin, or red skin, or white skin is nothing of a curse whatsoever. It's all the miracle of God and our self-inherent ability by what God has given us to adapt to our environment to survive. Because we're the strongest and the greatest of God's creation, so we're told. Obviously, we're also the most ignorant if we choose to be. One thing God gives me the wisdom of understanding, Dr. Ritchie, is that all men are created equal. After the point of creation, equal to what is up to them. You can be a man equal to that of all men like me who walks with God and only believes in that one race theory principle, that we are all one people of all equal, and then when we can unite together as that one people and stand against totalitarianism, we can actually find the true pursuit for happiness for all mankind in the world. I believe that. Or you can choose to be an ignorant, no-good piece of shit like you, Dr. Ritchie, who is so ignorant and blind to the reality of truth that you do nothing but walk this world as an ally to that of the totalitarianism, dividing people, causing more harm to people, creating hate in people, that does nothing but further the cause to harm people and enslave people, and deprive that of your own people, as you call it, and all people, their true pursuit of happiness by their God-given rights, as we declare. You're either an American or you're not, and clearly you are not an American. But everybody has the ability to become an American if they're willing to face the truth. If they're willing to do the due diligence and see it for what it really is and say, you know what, I'm not buying bullshit no more. I'm only going to believe the facts. Now, I know that's hard for you because you've been indoctrinated. And we see it right out. They don't even hide it. You know, they got that ditwit right now, Joe Biden, and Joe Biden just blurts things right out. Doesn't realize, like, I can imagine, I always imagine there must be somebody in the background, like, saying to Joe Biden, no, don't tell him that, no. And Joe Biden when it's done, you know, because he's the guy who said, we choose truth over facts. Remember he said that? And I get it, you know, this is a long-standing thing with the Democrats because they learn, like totalitarianism, if you can deprive people of true facts of knowledge and you tell them a thing is the truth, they'll believe it, and to them it becomes the truth. As long as they never find the facts, that prove it's a lie. And that's their goal, to keep you believing the lies are the truth by depriving you of the facts. But I'm giving you more than enough facts to consider. So we're going to move on here. And we're going to go forward. Here's what I got. The hatred endorsed by a president. Democrat Woodrow Wilson. I'm sure, Dr. Ritchie, you remember. Also, he was the man who showed the birth of a nation. You remember that, right? Democrat Woodrow Wilson showing the birth of a nation. You know, a lot of them said by the early 1900s the Ku Klux Klan and the red shirts were a thing of the past. But obviously the birth of a nation revived the Ku Klux Klan. Do you know, I can't prove this, but I know many Ku Klux Klan people I've spoken to in the past, and I'm not in any level of mutual respect for them, but in just conflict with them, and then them sticking it in my face so I would know. They declared to me that, you know, Woodrow Wilson was a grand wizard in the Ku Klux Klan, and I believe it because this man really loved the Ku Klux Klan so much he showed the birth of the nation in the White House with the entire then Democratic Party administration. Really. And I know, too, I noticed that some of your comments and things and commenters and what have you, they like to mention that, you know, with FDR being the party switch one. You guys always got this party switch thing you like to talk about, which is bullshit. So you're trying to tell me FDR was the party switch guy, really. You do remember that after Woodrow Wilson, FDR was the guy who appointed Hugo Black to the Supreme Court, right? 1934, Hugo Black, Supreme Court, ring a bell, Ku Klux Klan member to the Supreme Court to uphold the Jim Crow laws? Because they knew he would favor the supporting the Jim Crow laws, separate but equal? He was your party switch guy? Oh. And I know when I say that, you guys jump, well, Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson was a member of the Ku Klux Klan out of Texas. Lyndon B. Johnson did not like black people. Lyndon B. Johnson was the man who, he was the guy who said, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Snoops says that's unfounded. Republicans have challenged Snoops that they declare everything of which we know to be of official record that he did say underneath that claim that they found it unfounded, that they can't prove it. So go to Snoops and look up if Lyndon B. Johnson said, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years, and read everything underneath it about Lyndon B. Johnson. And then in the end conclusion, understand that FBI records and facts of historical documents prove, without a question of a doubt, that Lyndon B. Johnson was a Ku Klux Klan member out of Texas. Sorry, I'm not buying your bullshit. Your party switch. Okay? So we look here, and you remember the onslaught with Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson allowed the Ku Klux Klan and the red shirts to go out and literally kill tens of thousands of blacks and burn down communities across this country, and as well tens of thousands of white Republicans who supported the black community's growth. During this time, you had what was known as Black Wall Street. You had many prospering farming districts in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina of black communities that were rising up, buying land, and black children going to college, becoming educated, and starting their own banks, like in some of their communities, and the Democrats just couldn't stand it. And with Woodrow Wilson being in, he gave free rein to the Ku Klux Klan, and by being able to have the acts with the World War I, he was able to suppress anyone saying anything about what was going on with the Klan slaughtering these people across the country. And if you did say anything, you could be in jail for 6 years. Just disgraceful. That's the Democrats. That's the Democrats. I have videos on history I do on my channel, of which I'm a little bit behind because I'm an air conditioning contractor here in Florida, and it's my busy time of the year, so I haven't had time. But I'm making time to make this video for you, Dr. Richie, so-called Dr. Richie. I don't know what kind of doctor you are. You have to be a doctor of fucking idiocy, to tell you the honest truth. You're a disgraceful piece of shit. You're definitely no American, and you're definitely a DINO Democrat. I'll give you that. But you know what? I still say every man has a chance. Every man, if he's willing to face the truth. Every man, if he reaches in himself for his humanity and his God, the true God of all creation, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. One and only true God. Undeniable, which I'll do another video on that, and you can question me on that, but I believe my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, Almighty God. Once you reach for God, you reach for truth, because my God's the God of the truth. And I go by the wisdom my God gives me. Once you find that, and you can open your eyes and you can see beyond the idiocy that you speak out of your idiot mouth, and see people as under the true American tenets and principles and values of republicanism as one people of all equal. Whenever you're willing to take a stand with us, there'll be a place for you as a real American. But as long as you choose to remain this piece of shit you are, you're just nothing but a disgrace. Not only to black people and white people, but all freaking humanity. Live with it. Be who you are, be proud of it. Because one thing I can tell you too, God gives me the great wisdom of understanding. Don't ever do anything in this world that you can't live forever with knowing you've done. Because you will. You will, Dr. Richie. You may be able to get away like a lot of people, and get away with a lot of things for a lifetime here. But you will be known forever for what you've done. Trust me. But anyway, let's move forward. Now to reference about the idiocy. And some of the things, like I say, you're talking about slavery from 150 years ago for the final abolishment of it in this nation, of the great Republic of the United States of America. You know, for 80 years, America battled the Democratic Tory to abolish slavery. In the progression of it, we slowly eliminated slavery to the point where we had to go to war. And in that war, we had the highest of casualties ever in history of men, over 500,000 giving their lives to finally end slavery in this country and make it truly stand to the principles of what we declared in our Declaration of Independence. Not only just white men, black men. This country was founded by both, all men created equal. And, you know, the perspective of what we see going on today, and what gets me is the technology, the ability to research and know the facts and truth I'm talking about. Hell, I learned these things as a kid. I had to learn hard copy. And believe me, I read a lot of bullshit books of his story, and then had to read multiple other books. I had to get books from foreign countries and shit to be able to break down and actually find the truth, and spend literally hours upon hours in the federal archives, combing the federal archives for evidence of facts, reading historical newspapers from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s and letters that we had in the archives from people, what they wrote, and evidence of facts of things with treaties between people to gain the evidence. And today, you people have that at your fingertips. You can start. I had to walk miles, ride trains over to New York City, going to Philadelphia. I had to go all over the goddamn place and spend hours upon hours to learn what I know. And today, you people can sit in your home and pull this shit up on a computer, don't have to go nowhere, and you're still as ignorant as a goddamn rock. I don't get it. I just don't get it. But anyway, you talk about slavery. You don't talk about the slavery that still exists today by the very founders of the black African slave trade, who are still trading this very day in white and black slaves, no different than they were back in the time your little pussy ass is bitching about. Your ignorant, pea-brained freaking ass, Dr. Richie, is bitching about. The same founders of it, the same organizers of it, the same establishers of it, they're still doing it to this day. In Africa, slavery of black and white people. Maybe you're not aware. But you want to talk about slavery right here. You see here, migrant slave trade exploitation in Libya, power vacuum. Yeah, you know, you can buy a black African slave in Libya for $300. I can literally go to Libya and convert and become a Muslim and go buy a black slave for $300. Or I could buy a white Zidi woman for a sex slave for like $500 or $600. Yeah, still goes on, no different. Same shit over there. You know what? If you're so in for it and you're so much about what you're about, why don't you pack your shit and go over there and do something about it? Do something about that. If this country's so bad, where are you? When are you leaving? When are you going? And where the frick do you think you're going to go? You going to go back to Africa? Because I'm going to tell you right now, they still have slavery in Africa. Shit's still going on. Strong, man. Strong. Here, and you know what? You want to see, this is a guy. This is a guy right here escaping slavery. This is a real African man who was captured by Arabs and enslaved. Modern time, today. You see this video is from 2011. This man is a real African black man. Not an ignorant, pea-head, worthless piece of shit, indoctrinated idiot like you, Dr. Richie. This is a real African black man who experienced true slavery. He was a slave, and he escaped it. Let's just listen a little bit to him.
Thank you for joining us. Well, why don't we start at the beginning? Tell us how all of this started for you, where you were as a child when your world suddenly changed.
This horrible story of mine and the story of my people, in my generation, it started when I was a young boy, 7 years old, in 1986. That was the time I was sent by my mother to go to a local marketplace where these angry fundamentalists, Arabs and Islamists, Bagara or Janjaweed, came and stormed the markets and they killed the man brutally. I watched the men and women were killed around me. And that day I became a victim of slavery. I was taken up to northern Sudan where I served the northern Sudanese militiaman as his property. Where,
well, tell us.
So you understand, Dr. Richie, under Sharia law, the Islamic tenet, slavery is still legal. It's always been legal. It's never been abolished there. This man was really a slave, a real slave. There hasn't been a real slave in America in 150 years. This man knows what it's really about. But you know what? He's not blaming white people. He's not even blaming white Arabs. He's blaming inhumanity as it. He gets it because he understands the reality of real. Unlike your worthless, ungrateful ass who takes for granted so much greatness you have in this country. You're a disgraceful piece of shit, sir. But anyway, I'll include that link too. So here you go, Dr. Rashad Richie, Mr. Poor deprived slave man. You're an asshole. You're a worthless ass, sir. And I'm going to show you something. I just want to play this out. To show you, because here, my point is, it says Dr. Rashad Richie. Now, I'm presuming you have some kind of doctorate in education. Got a paper brain from the Wizard of Oz, did you? Because that's what it sounds like. You got a paper brain. Let me explain to you what an educated idiot is. An educated idiot is somebody who reads a version of a thing, and they have associate knowledge. You see, like in college, you get an associate's degree after 2 years, means you're just associated after 2 years of study. You get a bachelor's for 4 years. You get a doctorate, I believe, for 6 years, and you can, or a master's, and then 6 years, and then a doctorate for 8 years. Is that the way it works? Something like that. So, but all of this doesn't mean you really know what you're doing with that knowledge. It just means you obtained it. It means you studied it. And like you, Dr. Ritchie, you studied what you wanted to see in history. You see, that's the big problem. And I've had that problem when I was a kid, too. How you want things to be and how they really are. You know, because the truth is boring, because the truth never changes. I get a lot of people watch my videos and are like, dude, you always say the same thing. It's always the same thing. And even when I talk to people that know me, they're like, oh my God, I heard this story before. All right, I heard this before. They're like, Jesus, change it up. And I'm like, you can't change the truth. You're always going to hear the same story from me. You're always going to hear it the same way from me. You know why? The truth don't change. The truth is boring. It may be boring to many, but to me, it's all that matters is the truth. It's the only thing real. My God's the God of truth. My walk in life is the walk of truth. I don't give a damn about the truth. And that's all I'm about is the truth. If there's anything I'm saying you can prove wrong or is a lie, you let me know. But I'm going to give you an example of educated idiots. And I'm going to give you an example of how in humanity we have people that can be so deprived of common sense and reasonable thinking that they can exemplify the idiocy to the level of like Dr. Ritchie here. And let's take a look at some of that. Here, Dr. Ritchie, take a look. This could be you in the mirror. This is what you sound like. Maybe this will wake you up to maybe want to reconsider. Because I'm pretty sure God gave you the same ability as everybody to common sense. But just pay attention to this.
I tried writing a newspaper and contacting TV stations, but nobody seems to want to stay with this. So that's why I'm calling you guys. Okay.
What's the issue?
Well, over the past few years, I was involved in 3 separate car accidents involving deer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with the population and everything. Each of these incidents, they've occurred shortly after I saw a deer crossing sign on the highway. Well, my frustration is that Minnesota and North Dakota Department of Transportation would allow these deer crossings to be in such high traffic areas. I mean, I didn't see them on the interstate. Why are we encouraging deer to cross at the interstate? I don't get it. It's such a high traffic area. I mean, I understand that deer are wild animals. They travel across the streets occasionally to survive, and now, of course, to find food, but it seems to me that so irresponsible of us to allow these deer crossings to be in areas where these deer are so likely to be struck by oncoming traffic.
Yeah, you just heard that. This woman believes that deer are walking down the highway, not crossing, till they see a deer crossing sign. Just like you, Dr. Ritchie, she is lacking greatly in common sense. She has a vision of her own tunnel vision of what she wants to see, and she lacks the ability to see outside that tunnel. And until you're willing to pop your head out that tunnel, you're as stupid as this woman, Dr. Ritchie. You're as ignorant as this woman and as blind to reality as this woman. And that's what I'm just trying to say to you. Now, to give you another example, which I'm pretty sure you more than likely got your education on affirmative action. Or you're just really good at taking tests but lacking 100% like Donna the deer sign lady in common sense. And I'm going to give you an example of what happens with affirmative action. Here you have Hank Johnson out of Georgia, Democratic representative, another idiot like you, Dr. Ritchie. This guy here was a federal magistrate judge, an appeals judge. Believe it or not, passed the bar. Can you believe? We don't really know if he passed the bar. He did this stuff on affirmative action. He failed 3 times, I believe, and we never actually found out, or it's never been. He was just given it because the Democrats could use him. Obviously, when you realize how stupid it is. Let's take a listen to Hank Johnson, former magistrate, federal judge, now congressman of the Democratic Party, affirmative action educated idiot, just like Dr. Ritchie. Let's listen how smart he is.
12 miles from shore to shore, and at its smallest level, smallest location, it's...
So he has called in a Navy admiral because he has concerns about the island of Guam where we have a military base and we're looking to expand that base. His concerns are that if we expand the base and it increases the population, that the island could capsize like a canoe, you see? Now, I know that common average 6-year-old child, 7 years old, even if they didn't go to school, because I knew at 6, 7 years old that an island is a part of the earth and attached, it doesn't float like a boat and can capsize. But obviously, Hank Johnson doesn't know that. Take a listen.
7 miles between
Pay attention.
one shore
Take the
and
time. It's comical. It's enjoyable. Give me a good laugh for today.
I don't have the exact dimensions, but to your point, sir, I think Guam is a small island.
Very small island, about 24 miles, if I recall, long. So we're 24 miles long, about 7 miles wide at the least widest place on the island, and about 20.
You know, those affirmative action idiots, boy, they like to exemplify how smart they are by really giving you the details like this guy's doing. But, you know, that's like Dr. Ritchie does. You know, he does this, he rambles on with his details to try and make it appear that he's really smart. But as you're going to see, boom, the bubble pops when reality hits. Just pay attention.
About 12 miles wide on the widest part of the island. And I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that. The Guam population, I think, currently about.
Now, do you see what I'm talking about? You see, that's why affirmative action is bad. You see, now I see too is Dr. Ritchie, you had done an interview with someone else. Oh, I'm trying to find it. I have you doing an interview with somebody else. Jesse Peterson, you were doing an interview with. Yeah, right here, Jesse Peterson.
We'll talk. Let's first.
I like Jesse Peterson. Jesse Peterson's a man who gets it. You know, he's like he gets it. He really does. He gets it. And you know, you sit here and make fun of this man, who has good common sense, and he gets it. You don't realize this man knows a lot of what I know. He knows the truth of it. He faces the truth of it. He accepts the reality of it, and he knows from wisdom too, beyond just knowledge. He knows from wisdom. He grew up under the Jim Crow laws. Though he don't look that old, he is in incredible shape and incredible mind, state of mind for his age. He's an incredible, strong, all-out, 100% conservative American. God bless Jesse Peterson. And you make fun of him, you're an asshole. Because I'll tell you what, and it pretty much is out of envy. If once you come to the reality, like, and you see it, you're going to go back and you owe this man an apology for the way you treated him. You really owe this man an apology. That's if you ever come around to actually be an inhumane, true American. If you can find it in yourself to actually correct yourself within the idiocy of what you live day in and day out. But, you know, Jesse Peterson, I like him. I like Jesse Peterson. He's a good guy. He gets it. He tells the truth like it is. I don't agree with everything the man says, but, you know, on the basis of historical facts, he's done his homework a lot more than you have, Dr. Ritchie, and he knows a hell of a lot more about the truth than you do. I can tell you that. You really look like a fool making fun of Jesse Peterson. You know, and like Swalwell's another one. The economist of Swalwell knows a hell of a lot more than you do. And yet, yeah, I've seen where you make fun of both of them. But anyway, that's my video for today to talk about the truth. I'm going to post this for you to look at and consider on the video that I was commenting on with you talking, and we'll see where it goes from there, all right? And like I say, if anything I'm saying, if anybody feels you can prove that I'm lying, there's a comment box below. State your facts. Because I'm going to include the links to everything I say here. You can do your due diligence. I don't know if they'll allow the links, whatever. But I'll put the links in the best I can so you can go ahead and do your due diligence and research on it. And figure out what it is you want to believe. Either the truth by the facts or the fallacy of what you want to believe the truth to be because you can't face the facts of reality. You know, you make your own choice in this world. God creates all men equal to what? After the point of creation is up to you. You can either live and waste the rest of your life in a delusional fantasy of reality, or you can face the reality. I choose to face reality, live proud as who I am, God blessed by America. As an American, one of the most blessed of people on the earth is to be an American, because God loves America. Okay, you're a damn fool just wasting your life if you don't take advantage of the full pursuit of happiness under the great protection of these United States of America and this great Constitution of this great God-loved land of which in God we trust. You're a goddamn worthless idiot. What a waste of life. Get real. Really. But to everybody, thank you for your time. If you watched my whole video, hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, if you got anything to say, comment below. Everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time I make a video. I'll be back catching up my videos real quick about me and what's going on right now. I have been busy work-wise. I'm an air conditioner contractor in Florida. Gets very busy at summertime. It's hot. But, so everyone knows, in view of all the political issues going on, issues going on with the Democrats and the disruptiveness of the lies being told in this nation, I am actually considering closing down my business and figuring a way to devote my time fully to doing whatever I can best to make sure that the truth of this nation, our founding principles, and who we are as the true republic of the republicanism this nation was founded upon, stands strong and forward. I might be shutting my business down and devoting my life fully to this for the sake of my family, my nieces, my nephews, my brothers, my sisters, my grandchildren. Because I want them to have the same America I had. So we'll see how that goes, but for right now, I'll be catching up on my history videos as soon as possible. And if I can find a way to do what I'm planning on doing, I'll have plenty of time to devote my life to this all the time. And we're going to go real world, in their face, and get this done. But until that's possible, thank you all for the time for watching my video, and I'll see you next time when I get to make my next video. Thank you all, and have a great weekend.